One sunny morning, silver slimes, incredibly rare monsters, appeared in the clearing. Two guys were watching them from behind the trees. One said to the other, "Shh, it'll be okay if you just let them go." But he disobeyed him and rushed into the clearing. The young man shouted, trying to stop his comrade, but he wasn't listening. He was rapidly approaching the slimes. The next moment, there was a critical hit that tore the core in half. The guy swung his sword left and right, chopping up silver slimes. In a matter of seconds, the clearing became empty of monsters. The stranger's eyes glowed with a bright green fire. Player Takahashi Yukido received the following S-rank items: silver slime armor, gloves, and boots. The hero had an audience. A young man in a green hoodie said, "Got him," and everyone else from the critical hit. And the loot seems to be very rare. The young man thought his acquaintance was a real lucky man. The guy himself couldn't believe that he had managed to obtain 3 items of S-level equipment. Heroes thought it was too good to be true. It was like a reward for all the obstacles he had overcome in his past life, his fate in his previous life. Bronze-ranked adventurer Takahashi Yukido. He was on the first floor of the Tokyo dungeon. Suddenly, one of the men present showed the display of his smartphone. The monsters had gotten here as well. Now it's very dangerous for people to be outside. One of the guys exclaimed that it was better to go deeper into the dungeon. But some of them thought that the monsters from above would catch up with them. The young man turned to the old man, advising him to flee as well, for now was not the time to hunt slimes. The boy put his hand on his grandfather's shoulder, but he brushed it away. The old man stubbornly walked forward straight toward the slimes, ignoring the young man's warnings. Other people weren't going to stop him, for they thought Grandpa was crazy. Some young man pushed the old man and he lost his balance. The elderly man was on the ground, his hood off his head. The decades flew by quickly. Things have changed since the adventurers came out. Individual types of development have emerged in the familiar characterization system. The level only goes up when you defeat another monster. When the growth level changes, so do the characteristics. The young man dreamed of raising his strength by at least 5 more units. Sometimes adventurers are even given magic or skills. This is common. The old man rose to his feet and activated the scoreboard with his accomplishments. Takahashi Yukido has reached level 98. His strength, speed, and stamina reached 5, agility reached 4, magic power reached 3, and resistance to elements reached 2. The man has lived a lot and seen different things along the way. He tried his best to reach a high level. The young man was giving weak monsters. It helped to get to level 98. No one could beat Takahashi Yukido. He is the only one who could reach such heights in his lifetime. That day, despite his age, the old man overcame a lot of slimes. The blows were so strong that even the sword broke into 2 pieces. The maximum level is 99. The last one left, his efforts will fully pay off once he reaches the top. Just a little longer and the dream will finally come true. The old man lunged at the silver slimes with renewed vigor to gain the missing points. The hero rushed at the monsters with renewed vigor. He had to reach his goal as quickly as possible. Surely the growth of characteristics was just delayed. The man quickly got to a huge slime. It was translucent with a large core in the middle. As the weapon broke, the old man tore the monster apart with his teeth. It was at this point that the hero finally received a message from the system. Takahashi Yukido, you have reached the maximum level. Congratulations. The man couldn't believe his own eyes. What he had been waiting for so long had finally happened. Finally, he was rewarded for his so much hard work. His strength had finally increased by 1 unit. Takahashi's achievement board has been updated. His level is now 99. His strength has reached a value of 6. I can't believe they're kidding me. The man helplessly fell to the ground. Had it all been in vain? Yukido was crushed, so he won't get anything. Hope had left the hero's heart. He had no strength even to get to his feet. Monsters from the darkness were rapidly approaching the clearing. Has he lived his life for nothing? Everyone looked down at him, laughing behind his back. Takahashi didn't even get to save his own loving mommy. The old man's whole life flashed before his eyes. It seems to be coming to an end. Tears flowed from the hero's eyes. He was sorry that the goal had not been reached. Takahashi Yukido no longer has the strength to resist. Another moment and his life in this reality will end. The old body will be crushed by the demon's giant paw. The level ended with the death of a participant. There was an error in Takahashi Yukido's characterization system. The system has applied a life restoration and rollback function. The player's heart started beating again. Reveal hidden parameters. Accrued bonus characteristics as compensation. Unique characteristic points plus 9,999. He opened his eyes, but his vision was still not focusing well. Suddenly, the young man heard that he was being greeted. The next moment, he saw a smiling girl who said that Mr. Takahashi, Yukito Takahashi, had become an adventurer. The green-eyed hero was stunned by what he heard. Was all this really happening to him? He looked around. The girl asked, "Is something wrong?" Takahashi pulled himself together and thanked him for the pendant. A little later, when the young man was alone with his thoughts, he wondered what the hell was going on here. The hero stared at the screen of his smartphone, sweat beading on his face. The boy thought, "If I'm not mistaken, this is the day I registered with the Adventurers Guild." Takahashi Yukito didn't understand what had happened. He was able to remember that right before he died, he had seen something about bonus characteristics. He opens the window. Everything is just as it was then. How could it be otherwise? Suddenly, the hero noticed something that interested him. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. What's that all about? There is a new column in the table. Luck. A characteristic of luck that wasn't there before appeared here. Surely this characteristic must have been a hidden parameter in his past life. I find that hard to believe. Takahashi Yukito. I don't understand how this could happen to him. A man with 70 years of failure behind him. The young man remembered how old he had been not so long ago. Everything is great now. Just the right opportunity to test a new characteristic in a slime hunt. Moments later, the hero found himself in a Tokyo dungeon, on the first floor called Imperishable Footprints. Yukito saw his target almost immediately. It was as if Slammy had been waiting for him among the grass on purpose. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, the hero noticed some movement. When he realized what it was, he couldn't believe his own eyes. It was a silver slime, a very rare monster. He had only met him once in his entire past life. The silver slime then immediately ran away as soon as it saw the hunter. These slimes grant an incredible amount of experience points, but they are renowned for their elusiveness. Takahashi Yukito thought, "Just one step and my sword will get him." He was rapidly approaching his goal when suddenly something flashed in the grass. An arrow stabbed into the ground right at Yukito's foot. The hero heard someone's apology. Takahashi thought to himself, "You stupid bastard." The rare silver slime should have run away from such a noise, but it stayed put. The next moment, the fearful monster prepared to attack the hero. It was something unbelievable. Slime snapped out of his seat and approached quickly. The young man prepared to repel the attack. The guy's sword literally ran into a silver slime. The tip of his weapon easily reached the monster's core. It couldn't take the impact and shattered into pieces. This win immediately raised his level in the game. The sword broke with a single blow. These silver monsters are very strong. Now Takahashi Yukito needs to acquire a new weapon. The young man noticed something shining on the grass nearby. He couldn't believe his own eyes. S-rank loot is a cool silver sword. The hero was pleased with such a great start. He had already obtained a large silver slime sword. Feature: increased attack power. 30% chance to miss the target due to silver slime's dodging tendency. Yukito was satisfied. He was going to have a good hunt. The young man looked around and froze in place in amazement. There were 4 silver slimes sitting in the neighboring clearing at the same time. This was truly incredible luck. The hero even wondered if he was dreaming. In the next moment, 4 monsters simultaneously flew straight at the guy. They were very belligerent. There's no other way out, we'll have to fight, given the peculiarities of his new weapon. Takahashi Yukito realized that it wouldn't be possible to destroy everyone at the same time. Punch after punch, he delivered several critical hits. The hero made it through in a matter of minutes. Luck really works. A critical hit and a magnificent armor appeared on the grass. Somehow it all worked out. The young man won them all at once. His hunt continued for about another hour. During this time, Takahashi Yukito met 10 silver slimes. From each defeated monster, the hero dropped a rare loot. There was nothing left but to recognize that luck is not an empty sound. The hero was pleased with such an acquisition of his. This is really something incredible. The adventurer collapsed on the grass, savoring his current accomplishments. Yukito lay on the ground and looked up at the sky. He thought, "Now that I have this kind of power, I can definitely become an outstanding person. Perhaps he can make his own family happy. The young man's sick mom deserves help. His handsome sister could also use a little farthing." The young man raised his hand to the sky, dreaming of how he could help all of his family. Suddenly, the hero sat up abruptly. He finally realized he once again had a home to return to. It's been 70 long years of loneliness. Now he has a chance to change all that. The young man rose to his feet. He really wants to go home now. His apartment is 203. and the name on the sign is Takahashi. The hero's hands trembled slightly, and he reached for the doorknob. He realized it was better to calm down now. Why he was getting so worked up in the first place. The guy exhaled sharply, trying to calm the frantic rhythm of his heart. Takahashi Yukito finally decided to open the door of his house. But before he could do so, the door opened on its own. The hero was looked at by his little sister. She wanted the same color. The girl was very happy about the appearance of her brother. The young man rushed to hug Nozomi, who was a bit confused by this display of affection. The girl laughed and asked why it was Yukito acting like that. Was it really such a hidden camera prank? Nozomi asked her brother to let her go, but he still held her tightly in his arms. The hero thought that this time he wouldn't let anyone hurt his family. Yukito won't let anyone else take his treasure. The hero told his sister everything that had happened to him. Belle was amazed. Could they really help save her mom with this? Yukito replied, "Sure, it just takes a little effort." The next day, the guy sprang into action. He traded the rare items he had received. With the money he received, the young man decided to get something. Takahashi attended the auction and bid 10 million for one lot. He managed to acquire the highest quality healing potion. The hero's next destination is a hospital. Yukito, along with Nozomi, approached the room where their mom was lying, and they opened the door after hearing permission to do so. As they entered the room, the relatives smiled at their mother. Mom was very happy about her children who came to visit her. She asked how they were doing. Yukito replied that they should be the ones asking about her business. Nozomi opened the box she had brought and showed her mom the delicious goodies. The woman said, "You shouldn't have spent so much on me. You should have eaten with that money yourself." The young man told his mother that she no longer had to worry about money, and the girl added that they had another gift. The patient's face became surprised, and she inquired which one it was. Yukito replied, "He knows it sounds weird, but mom needs to drink this." He held out a bottle of elixir to the woman. Nozomi explained, "Big brother made money in the dungeon and bought you this." The woman was surprised, for Yukito had just become an adventurer. How did he manage to earn so much money? The hero replied that he was just lucky. The dungeon was a big lottery. The son again asked his mother for a drink of the elixir and held out the bottle to her. The woman carefully uncorked the cork. She didn't argue and obediently poured the elixir into her mouth. The next moment the real magic happened. The woman's body began to glow. Brother and sister kept their eyes on mom. They were eagerly awaiting the result. The patient felt incredibly relieved, as if a heavy weight had fallen from her shoulders. It was much easier to breathe. The hero smiled in relief, for this was great news. Nozomi exclaimed, "Good job, brother." The next moment the woman said that the potion tasted nasty. Her son handed her a dessert that would help her get rid of the disgusting aftertaste of the medicine. When my mom was next seen by the doctor, he said the symptoms had subsided and the disease had stopped progressing. She needed to go to a short rehab. Afterward, the woman was finally released home and recovered. They can live the three of them under one roof again. It's like a happy dream. For the first time in a long time, the woman was finally able to eat dinner at home. After lunch, she began washing her own dishes and told the children, "Nothing soothes like home walls." Nozomi was very happy that her mom was feeling better, but Yukito didn't think it was enough. The girl looked at her brother in surprise. She was waiting for an explanation. The hero replied that this potion is only a temporary measure. It has no power to cure the disease completely. This news upset the beauty. She asked what they should do then. Yukito explained, "You need a much more possible thing, like an actual magic elixir." His sister wondered if he was referring to something advertised on TV, an item found by the world's best adventurer. It can be found 50 surfaces deep and can't be bought for any money. The sister added that this item is truly unique. Yukito agreed that was right. That was exactly what he was aiming for. A unique item is a special item that can only be disposed of by the person who found it. A reward that can be obtained without defeating a possible creature. Nozomi asked, "If we can't buy, then we'll just have to find it ourselves." The sister wanted to know if the brother could go down to that depth. The young man replied that in theory it could not be done, for he would die a terrible death on the way. The girl decided that in that case they couldn't get this miracle elixir. The hero smiled and decided to clarify, "I said it was only in theory." Yukito thought that not only had he gotten lucky, but he had also retained knowledge from his past life. The young man remembered that this elixir could also be found on high surfaces. He had heard of one exception. The boss of the 20th floor is an ancient golem. The uniquely ferocious of it turns out to be the elixir they need. But the chance of this boss appearing is categorically small. They need a rare item from a rare boss is a matter of chance, the hero thought. In my previous life, I've only heard of obtaining an elixir from this golem once. Now the young man was sure that with his current disposition, everything would be fine. He would definitely find the elixir and save his mother. The sister noticed the suspicious look on her brother's face. Yukito asked, "Is he really that suspicious?" The girl winked. She thought her brother could do anything. The young man was greatly encouraged by his sister's words. It's nice when your family believes in you. But still, before going into the dungeon, the hero needs to prepare. Nozomi was stunned by this revelation. What exactly is meant by the word prepare? The hero was sure that everywhere and always a way could be found. Yukito walked over to the dresser where their family photo was framed. He needed to gather things to go deeper into the dungeon. It was worth starting with the gear. A large silver slime sword. Feature: increased attack power. There is a 30% chance to miss the target due to Silver Slime's tendency to dodge. Silver Slime. Tear, with a 33% chance, can reduce the damage taken. While the young man was packing, his sister watched him closely. She inquired of Yukito, "Are you getting ready to hit the road already?" The hero answered in the affirmative. "Are you really going to go like that? Usually warriors wear heavy armor for a dungeon trek." The young man agreed, but explained that he was not strong enough to carry such a thing. The window of characteristics reveals a person's potential. The boy realized he could only hope for luck. With those stats, he won't be able to pull a full outfit, so he'll just have to bring his sword. Yukito thought that there were many skills due to the level elevation. For example, Mighty Layered Lunge was a combat skill that had a 30% chance of delivering 3 critical hits in a row. Nozomi asked, "You want to increase your performance? There's a 5th floor." The young man immediately remembered Alice's wreath. You can get liquid loot from the local monsters. Magic fruit. He is Yukito and will help Yukito. The sister asked that one way or another the brother take care of himself. The girl had packed him a snack for the road, though he'd be able to get enough fruit still. The boy thanked Nozomi sincerely for her concern. One package was displayed in the system window. The hero opened the door and left his home. He set out again for adventure. The forest was dark, with ghostly purple mushrooms on the tree trunks of the plants. Predatory plants fed on insects. After walking some more, the hero finally reached the 5th floor. It was called Alice's Wreath. Almost the entire space is filled with plant-type monsters, so it's easy to lose your way here. But the 5th floor was considered low-level and had long since been cleared out by other adventurers. Yukito decided that as long as he had the map with him, there shouldn't be any problems. The hero continued his journey through the forest, relying on his temper. He immediately spotted a den of Ents, humanoid trees. The young man knew that the Ents used mimicry to set up their sieges. That's why they look like trees. The guy agreed that their disguise was perfect. A closer look reveals that there are no veins on the leaves. The young man also noticed that the roots were growing in a strange direction. Ents use roots as people legs. They use it to move through the forest. The next moment, the hero saw red eyes on the tree trunk. The guy was pleased with his find. The critical hit worked again. The forest monster was cut in half. Yukito thought it was enough just to anticipate their appearance, and it was a done deal. The next moment, the young man received his prize. A magical fruit appeared on the ground. The hero immediately picked it up and took a bite. He could taste a slight flavor of pear or apple. The guy realized that taste didn't play a role. He needed to check his stats. Yukito realized that his stats had increased. Thanks to the magic fruit, although its effect is minor, even he can become a strong warrior. After that, the hero began a brutal hunt for the Ents. He fought and ate and fought. During this day, the hero was very tired of the taste of fruit. He decided to fortify himself with the food that his sister gave him with him. After lunch, the guy decided to see if he had already reached his pumping limit. Yukito was glad that he had finally reached the intermediate combat level. Finally, the young man decided it was worth wrapping up. Time to head back. It was at this point that the hero felt someone's presence. The boy turned sharply and exclaimed, "Who's here?" The hero heard, "Hey, you can't take all the loot for yourself." This newcomer needs a lesson in good manners. 2 men appeared in the clearing, one gleaming with gold teeth and the other with a ring on his finger. Yukito replied, "I don't see the adventurer credentials. Are you guys the type to profit at the expense of others?" The smaller man replied, "Yes, and there is, a spoiled brat who depends on his equipment." And the other added, "It's not good for you. If you give it to us nicely, we'll let you live." The hero made quick work of these brigands. Yukito thought. It was close, but it went like clockwork. The enemy used the bee sting lunge, a level 25 skill. In other words, his enemy was much stronger than him. Bee sting lunge guarantees an accurate hit that the opponent cannot avoid. The skill reduces the attack power by 30%. Thanks to clothing that is soaked in tears of silver slime, the hero was able to reduce damage. To make a long story short, only 30% of the force of the blow reached him. If it wasn't for luck, Yukito's stomach would be a huge hole right now. The injured man's partner said fearfully, "Who would have thought Yamada would be knocked out with one punch?" The hero suggested that he surrender, then he would save his own life. But the man wasn't going to give up. He exclaimed, "Don't underestimate me, a warrior is easily defeated at a distance." Yukito replied that was right. He couldn't reach him from that distance. The robber smiled. Did the adventurer give up so easily? The hero wasn't going to give up. He activated the portal and launched his hand into it. The next moment he pulled out some kind of artifact from there. He decided to use the inventory as well. It was a staff abundantly covered with a variety of colors. The ugly robber laughed. His artifact looked more warlike. It resembled a magical staff. The newbie doesn't seem to know what it is at all. Yukito swung his inventory, substance of absurdity. The young man picked up this artifact when he defeated the Baron Ent. The opponent smiled. He thought the young man was an amateur. The substance of ridiculousness is a rare item. This unstable junk activates random spells. The chance of casting something useful is 0. There is a 40% chance of the wielder getting a failure, 30% chance of getting weak enchantments, 20% chance of getting a buff or debuff, and only a 9% chance of creating a mid-level spell. To get into those 30% of receiving weak charms will already be a great luck. In any case, there was no way to cast the desired spell. Right now, Yukito is in the process of the magic lottery. The brigand used Fireball, a medium-level spell. Also, if his opponent hits 9% and summons something of the same level, his hit will still be stronger due to the equipment. Special equipment for mages plus 50. The mage was sure that victory would go to him anyway. The outlaw thought the luck that is inherent in newcomers would not save him. The mage pointed the fireball directly at Yukito. The hero didn't budge. He just stood there, staring at the rapidly approaching threat. The young man muttered to himself, "It's finally stirring." The guy closed one eye. He was done too. His magic staff can still do some things. The ridiculousness substance activated. It was something truly powerful. It seemed as if a volcano had erupted somewhere nearby. The young man's face was devoid of emotion. The hero pointed his staff directly at the enemy. The fire was destroying everything in its path. The sight was truly impressive. Just a moment more, and there would be nothing left of the forest. The mage couldn't believe that his fire circle had been taken over by an opponent. He grabbed his head. How did this kid reproduce a top-level meteor spell? The chance of such a result was 0.05%. The danger was fast approaching. The fire was even in the sky. The mage was very scared, but he tried to reassure himself, "Of course it's just illusion magic, isn't it?" Suddenly, he felt his hair begin to burn. Everything around him was just hot as hell. The mage begged the newcomer to stop. The robber was incredibly scared. He screamed in terror. The man was so frightened that he gagged his pants. The hero didn't rest until everything around him turned to charcoal. The mage turned into a small, helpless cub. Such incredibly powerful magic broke the artifact that Yukito had picked up from Ant. The young man brought the broken staff closer to his eyes to get a good look at it. In the next instant, the hero discarded the inventory as unnecessary junk. The hero realized that he was too lucky and was happy with this fact. The young man looked around, surveying the battlefield. He himself seemed to be stunned by his victory. Yukito thought, leaving these two here unattended is a bad idea. The hero made the decision to take the robbers outside. He decided they needed to be immobilized first. After tying up both bandits, the guy decided that would be enough. Yukito walked towards the stairs. Time to go back. He pulled both robbers behind him. The hero was on his way home. The whole thing resembled a computer game. When they returned from the dungeon, the young man handed both villains over to the police. The interrogations ended when the sun was already over the horizon. Only now did Yukito realize how tired he was. He wouldn't be able to head home yet. He had somewhere to stop. The hero came to the office. At the reception, he apologized that he had not been in touch for a long time because there were some small difficulties. The girl asked, "Are you Mr. Takahashi Yukito?" She smiled, for the police had had time to report the young man's adventures. The girl congratulated the hero on his victory. As a reward, the hero's rank is upgraded to silver. The young man was stunned. There must have been some mistake. After all, he had done nothing. Reaching the silver rank is not an easy task. Even talented people usually take at least 3 years to achieve it. The adventurer must obtain sought-after items, defeat many monsters. In other words, make a valuable contribution to the guild. But the girl behind the counter replied that there was no mistake. Takahashi Yukito caught 2 guys from the Crimson Hands gang. The Crimson Hands are a large criminal gang. The hero thought, "So I've gotten so many points from those scum that I deserve to be promoted to silver rank." The girl said that the young man had worked hard. She added, "These 2 people have strength comparable to that of silver-ranked adventurers." The hero couldn't believe that these 2 were stronger than he thought. He could have been up to his neck in mud if it hadn't been for luck. Yukito took the silver pendant in his hands and said he was just lucky. The girl stagnantly replied, "There you go again. Modesty befits a silver-ranked adventurer. We look forward to your achievements on the lower floors of the dungeon." The available floors are determined by the adventurer's rank. Bronze ranks can go down to the 10th floor. Silver ranks can go down to the 30th floor. Gold adventurers have no restrictions. The guy put a silver chain with a pendant around his neck. He wanted to get to at least the 20th floor. The guild worker replied, "I have faith in you, but you should know that this place is quite difficult to curb." She added that the company does not recommend going there on your own. Such an adventure could be very dangerous. The hero thanked the girl for her concern. He turned and walked toward the exit, and the beautiful woman escorted him with a glance. Yukito thought with a smile, "I grew up much faster than I could have expected." By the way, essentially meeting the brigands was also due to luck. Suddenly the young man heard someone addressing him. It was an elderly man in a tea suit and a cylinder. He asked, "Could you give me a minute of your time?" The hero stopped. He was ready to listen to his grandfather. "You're the adventurer who defeated those criminals, aren't you?" the stranger inquired. "Yamada Jinbei, thief and murderer, 20 years old, 180 centimeters. Apprehension reward 1 million yen. Hashimoto Hiroshi, thief and murderer, 30 years old, 150 centimeters. Apprehension reward 1 million yen. The hero replied that the 2 men had attacked him. Grandpa's face couldn't be seen because of the cylinder field. The next moment, the older man grabbed Yukito's hand and thanked him. The young man looked dumbfounded. He was trying to figure out what was going on here. Grandpa ripped the portraits of those 2 scumbags off the board and exclaimed that they had killed his son. "The police couldn't get one step closer to him and you managed to catch them." The man barely held back tears. Yukito said, "No need. I was only doing my duty as an adventurer." The old man bowed. He was very grateful to the young man. Such an act of an elderly man touched the hero. The stranger rejoiced that he could now bring good news to his own son's grave. The guy looked at him and thought, "I don't think I've ever been this grateful in my past life." The young man looked at his own hands. Hearing such words was really nice. By the way, regarding the past life, if nothing is changed, the world will be destroyed. If things go on as they did then, it will happen when he's already old. The young man thought deeply, "Is it possible to do nothing knowing what awaits us?" But the next moment he pulled himself away. "No, don't jump above your head, you slime clown. You're too weak to fight for world peace." The boy grabbed his head, trying to calm his own emotions. First, he needs to save his own mom, and then think about the fate of the world. That's the only thing he should be thinking about right now. Meanwhile, in one dungeon that was only lit thanks to torches, someone was shouting loudly. There was a kerosene lamp on a large stone, and it illuminated daggers of various shapes that lay nearby. The man present in the room was very enraged. He was beating his fists on the makeshift table. He couldn't believe that someone was able to defeat Yamada and Hashimoto. If it becomes the same with other gang members, he won't be able to pay the tax to Gramila. The man grasped one of the daggers. There was a newspaper on the table, where Takahashi Yukito's face looked up at him from a photograph. The bandit plunged the dagger right into the young man's face and promised, "I'll finish you the hell off." Then he was able to calm his anger and thought he had to be very careful. This young man is not simple if he alone could overcome Yamada and Hashimoto. This Yukito's strength is clearly not lacking, but he has his methods, so that strength is irrelevant. His luck ran out the moment the head of the Crimson Hands took an interest in him. A little time passed and the hero set off again. Quite quickly he reached the 15th floor of the dungeon. The young man stood on the mountain plain and looked around. It was the peak of the lonely mountain of death. There are many narrow passages. This terrain is very treacherous. Due to geography, this peak is difficult to clear as a group. The hero observed others trying to do so. The young man concluded that it's easy to go unnoticed on the 15th floor. That's why this place is crawling with criminals. The hero's sword slammed into the rock with incredible force. This act of Yukido's caught the attention of others. The guy thought it was the perfect arena for lone hunters like him. Here, he can continue to level up and finish learning all the necessary skills to pass the 20th floor. The hero snatched up his sword, intending to defeat the huge bird. At first, the young man only wanted to rise by silver slimes, but he probably outbid them so much that they stopped sliming. Now Yukido chose a different strategy. He decided to slaughter as many monsters as possible. It's time. We need to get some good work done today. One by one, Takahashi met various monsters along the way and successfully overcame them. He defeated a giant bird, a ravenous armadillo, strange one-eyed creatures, and a giant bear. He received magic items, a bow, sword, and gloves. The hero was unaware that he was being watched all this time. The leader of the Scarlet Hands analyzed his enemy. A loner, a large silver slime sword, no armor. There can be no doubt. This Takahashi Yukito is truly a great warrior. The man couldn't believe his own eyes. This rascal had decided to encroach on his territory. But after cooling down a bit, he decided there was no need to attack right now. Bandit decided to wait until the time was right. All that day, the gang leader hid behind the rocks, watching his victim. Takahashi seems to have decided to take a break. A good idea came into him about how to linger on this floor. The man suddenly realized that he didn't have to interfere at all. The bandit got to his feet and ran away. He realized this was his territory. Here, on the 15th floor of the dungeon, the boss is him. In nature, monsters and animals are divided into ecosystems. The gang leader decided to capitalize on this knowledge. If you reduce the number of predators, you can achieve your own goals. The bandit went to put his plan into action. The bandit decided to increase the amount of loot. He did a good job of bringing his idea to life. Thanks to his intervention, the monsters will begin to multiply at a furious rate. If the pyramid collapses, their reproduction will be difficult to stop. After returning to his dungeon for the night and getting some rest, the leader of the Crimson Hands gang realized it was time. He came up with the idea that Takahashi Yukito would just have an accident. The adventurer will simply perish at the clutches of monsters like so many others before him. Such a demise will not attract the attention of the community. The man was pleased, for everything had come just as he had planned. He had something in his pouch that would repel the monster insects. There was one last step left to put this cunning plan into action. The bandit ordered the predatory insects to attack that idiot Yukido. He wished those freaks would eat the guy without leaving even bones. The gang leader was pleased with his plan. Meanwhile, the unsuspecting Takahashi was destroying the next one on the essay, earning himself points. Finished with the wild boar, the hero listened. He heard some strange sound that was rapidly approaching and growing louder. In an instant, the sky above Yukido turned black. The hero could not understand what this black cloud that hovered above him was. It was a whole swarm of deadly cicadas. These things were very dangerous. Takahashi realized that it was impossible to deal with so many dangerous insects alone. The guy made the decision to flee. The only thought in the young man's mind was, we need to join someone now. Where do groups of adventurers usually gather? It was hard to think in such a stressful situation, the hero recalled. In a past life, I heard there was a supply base somewhere on this floor. Ever since the base was built here, defending the peak of the lonely mountain of death has become much easier. It seems to be located in a cave of red mud. The young man remembered that he hadn't seen a marker for this base on his map of the area. A huge chasm appeared ahead of Yukido, which must be overcome in order to continue the journey. He stopped, but realized that there was no time to lose, for his life was at stake. Using his sword, he was able to descend straight down the sheer cliff. After reaching the ground, the hero pushed off and scrambled up a nearby cliff. It must be here, for the colors of the soil are different. The guy didn't know how to get in. He yelled that there were a lot of monsters around, he needed help. His shouts did nothing to help, the wall looked unchanged. Yukito looked back and saw a black cloud in the sky. The monsters had almost caught up with him. The guy turned his wall to the rock and prepared to defend himself. He hardly counted on help anymore. Suddenly, he decided to try to hack this passage. What the hero saw in the next moment was simply stunned. In the tunnel lay many people, women and men in underwear with their hands and feet bound and their mouths taped shut. Yukido Takahashi couldn't believe his own eyes. What the hell had happened here? The prisoners looked at the guy. You could see in their eyes they were hoping for help. The young man asked, I hope I didn't just now accidentally discover the existence of some kind of pervert association? None of these men could answer, for they had gags in their mouths. The hero agreed that it didn't look like it. The young man swiftly, like lightning, swept through the crowd of these unfortunates. He smiled, holding his sword in his hand. It was indeed skillful. Seconds counted, almost imperceptible to the human eye, he prisoners of the human putas. The people were grateful for the rescue, for they had already said goodbye to life. It was his turn to ask questions. Yukito wanted to know what happened here. It was explained to him that they were attacked, and then all present suddenly lost consciousness. The fact that they were not killed could only mean one thing. The adventurers were for sale. The young man thought confusedly, "Have I really found a criminal crawler logo? This point should be a supply point for adventurers." Suddenly the hero realized, perhaps this place would become a supply point later. Local law enforcement found the place one day. They were the ones who made this place out of a base for adventurers. Yukito Takahashi realized that he had come here too soon. In the past, he was interested in nothing but his own life. He'd spent the last 10 years of his life getting high off of slime hunting. The sense of time diminishes with age. The next moment the hero himself stopped the flow of his own thoughts. Now was not the time for such reflections. It's urgent to figure out how to escape the ravenous insects. The prisoners he found are unarmed. This unexpected encounter really surprised and confused him. Now is the time to pull yourself together and take immediate action to save yourself. The hero addressed the audience. I understand your situation, but they need to pull themselves together and listen to him. Yukito pointed a finger at the sky and explained that right now a cloud of deadly cicadas was flying at them. The terrifying monsters were fast approaching. A little more and people would not be able to escape. There were too many predators on the 15th floor of the dungeon. The prisoners looked out of the cave. They couldn't believe their own eyes. People were shocked. Panic gripped them. The monsters were too many. Yukito said, "As you may have noticed the time, we don't have any. If they want to be saved, let them unite with him." A skeptical expression appeared on the boys' faces. They couldn't hide from so many monsters. One girl said it didn't make sense since they didn't have any weapons. The young man said the crawlers had all their stuff. The hero smiled and explained that he could give them weapons. He activated the system and began pulling prizes from the table for destroying monsters. Yukito managed to get a fair amount of money. Swords, bows, shields, and various armor appeared in the cave. The former prisoners were stunned by so many different weapons. Takahashi added that he might even transfer ownership to them. People looked dumbfounded, for these weapons were expensive. One of the girls added that it was all very rare. The prisoners wanted to know where he got it all from. The heroine still hadn't introduced herself. People had more questions than answers. None of them had ever seen this guy before. He was a real mystery. The young men rushed to pick out weapons and clothing. They began to fight with each other over these riches. Some felt that defense was more important than weapons. One of the guys said, "If you sold it all, you'd make a real fortune." The girl wondered if they could really take it. Yukito nodded. The hero added that he doesn't ask them for anything in return. The only thing he asked was to be allowed to boss him around a bit. The former prisoners did not argue, after all. He was saving their lives. The men were happy with their new armor and weapons, so they didn't mind fighting under Yukito. The red-haired beauty picked out her bow. She said with a smile, "Hear and obey." All present one by one gave their consent to the hero's command. One stocky young man even agreed to act as a decoy. Takahashi asked them to shut up and listen. Scenes from his past life appeared in the young man's mind. It was that moment when there was not much time left before his death. The young man was truly grateful to be given the opportunity to lead that operation. Some of the guys looked at each other with smiles. They waited to see what their new acquaintance would say. Yukito didn't share their mirth. He was serious. The hero stood at the entrance to the cave. He spread his arms out in different directions. The young man thought they should take advantage of the narrow entrance of this cave. That way they don't have to be with all the monsters at once. Takahashi asked everyone present to try to kill as many insects as possible. He alternately shifted his gaze from face to face. Some looked scared and some looked determined. Yukito believed that together they would be able to defeat this cloud of monsters. The new captain of the small detachment raised his sword upward and commanded his subordinates, "To battle!" When the monsters finally reached the cave, Yukito destroyed them one by one. The hero chose the right strategy. He managed to overcome the monsters in the narrow passage of the cave. The young man swung his sword left and right. The other participants in this battle also doled out monsters. A red-haired beauty was aiming at them with a bow, while a young man of small stature was a skilled mage. Their team successfully resisted the attack of predatory insects. There were so many monsters that the entrance to the cave was completely hidden from view. The monsters were too many, but people continued to fight for their own lives. Many insects had already been destroyed, but more were coming. The former prisoners began to lose hope. There was no end in sight to these creatures. Yukito Takahashi saw that it wasn't working so far. The hero himself didn't realize if he could change the course of this battle. Suddenly, those present all felt the rock shudder and rocks from the ceiling began to fall on them. The captain told his squad to retreat without breaking formation. People began to run deep into the tunnel. There were more and more monsters, and there was no end in sight. At this rate, these insects would destroy the rock. The people began to panic. They thought they were about to die. Yukito quickly looked around, trying to analyze the situation. The hero thought, the adit is unfinished, so it's not reliable at all. Suddenly, the young man noticed an explosive on the floor near one of the tunnels. The guy realized it was a chance for salvation. That's an explosive worth using. The crawlers must have used it to expand the tunnel. Takahashi walked over and picked up the explosives. The young man shouted, addressing the others. Listen up, everyone. There's a disembowel in the cave. Look for it. One of the guys replied, explosives? Sure, it can be used as a weapon, but the girls also rushed out to look for dynamite, all seeing it as a chance for salvation. For several hours, they fought desperately against the deadly cicadas. It was very difficult, but it was worth fighting for our own lives. During this time, only a third of the cave remained. The people realized they had nowhere else to retreat. One of the girls has lost almost all her mana. The walls are about to collapse. The hero tried to control the situation, but he also saw signs of destruction. He closed his eyes and finally recognized that there was no other option. Yukito shouted, attention! People looked back at him. The hero asked me to give him all the explosives I found. No one present argued, but they doubted that this explosive would be enough to destroy all the cicadas. It's like trying to grind water in a stupor. The young man caught the dynamite. He was sure he would be fine. He decided to blow up the cave. The rocks would overwhelm these insects. These monsters have low intelligence. They primarily target things that pose a greater threat. Simply put, the monsters will attack the one who destroyed them the most, and that's Yukito. One of the girls screamed that there was a hole in the ceiling. Everything was about to collapse. The squad captain ordered his subordinates to flee. One of the guys shouted to the hero, are you just going to stand there? Do you really think you're just going to die with them? They wanted to know if the savior knew exactly what he was doing. Yukito smiled. He wanted to be trusted. Now he was left alone with a whole cloud of killer insects. The hero understood that sometimes you have to take risks. This is that moment. He decided that now would be a good time to use the X-13 explosives. The demon cicadas. The young man was warned by the system that he had no detonation skills, so there was a 50% chance of an explosion. Due to the hunter's class, the probability of detonation is low, but his luck should help. A new warning came in. Items damaged, 25% chance of detonation. But it worked in the end. The hero flew into the abyss. He had to fend off on the fly those insects that rushed to chase the guy. The young man realized that he had to believe. His plan would work. Like a true acrobat, he tried to regain his balance in free fall. All the while, the hero continued to hold his silver sword tightly. Yukito once again took advantage of the dissecting kick that had never failed him so far. One monster survived after that. The monster looked directly into the cicada's eyes. The hero decided that this was the end. He'd had enough. This time, he took advantage of a critical hit. With a crushing blow, the young man pushed off, trying to get out of the abyss. Takahashi was pleased with his luck. It still worked. The people watching this fight were stunned. The monster had just absorbed his entire punch. They held their breath, for Yukito might fall now. The hero used his sword again, thrusting it into the sheer rock. But this time, this technique didn't work. The sword blade didn't stay in the stone. The next moment, the young man actually flew into the abyss. It seemed impossible to escape. Maybe suddenly someone had dropped a rope from above that lassoed over his arm like a lasso. And at the last moment, Yukito managed to grab on, gratefully accepting help from his new friends. The men stood behind each other and began to pull the rope. The hero quickly made it to solid ground. He smiled. The whole area was littered with rocks and the remains of deadly cicadas that had been destroyed. When the young man finally sat down on the rock, he looked back at the result of his labor. The guy was proud that they had managed to defeat an entire army of insect monsters. Those he saved said, "It's unbelievable that after fighting so many monsters, they have no casualties at all." Takahashi was pleased with the result. The system reported, a large number of deadly cicadas had been destroyed. Yukito was now given the rank of fighter. The damage he dealt to the insect-type monsters was 20%. He has reached level 3. The skill Warrior Intuition has been obtained. The bandit was so enraged at the failure of his scheme that he kicked the table. The man clutched his hand to his head, for that scumbag had destroyed their base. He realized that he would have to answer for it. You could even lose your own life. The bandit grabbed the bottle and shouted, "This trouble happened because of this idiot." Uncorking the wine, he took a greedy sip straight from the bottle. After drinking almost all of it, the man threw the bottle at the wall and it shattered into splinters. The gang leader promised himself that he would finish off Takahashi Yukito personally. He was so enraged that he was preparing to take revenge, even if it cost him his life. Meanwhile, the hero, having finished with his business on the lower level, came to the company's office. The young man noticed that everyone present, upon seeing him, began to look for something. Yukito noted to himself that he had been recognized more often since then. The woman behind the counter said, "You've demonstrated yourself magnificently again." The hero was now called a mountain crusher, who saved many people. All the guilds were asking Takahashi to join them. But today the hero was not in the mood for a dialogue. He apologized and explained that he was in a big hurry. In fact, the young man ignored all offers because he is not allowed to join the team yet. Guy thought about an elixir for his mom, since it would take more time and effort to create. Under those circumstances, he won't be able to create it anytime soon. Loot in teams is distributed randomly. It is because of the likelihood of getting a rare item is greatly reduced. Thanks to some clever calculations, the hero concluded that the more people in the guild, the lower the winning percentage. But Takahashi decided not to get upset. After all, he had always defended the dungeon solo in his previous life. Why change anything now? Leaving the office, having finished all his business for the day, the hero headed home. There his mom and sister were waiting for him with a delicious dinner. Yukito was pleased, for he had managed to get quite hungry during his adventures. Before tackling dinner, everyone prayed, thanking God for the food. Now Takahashi could enjoy a delicious treat with his family. The taste of the food seemed very familiar to the hero. Perhaps he had tasted something similar in his past life. Despite the fact that their family had never been wealthy, they always celebrated holidays. Nozomi congratulated her brother for already reaching level 20. The mother was very worried about her son. She asked, "Are you sure you can do it?" They say that after the 20th level, the difficulty of the tasks increases exponentially. My sister would say that she was also worried because only 15% of the hunters were able to pass level 20. A mother admonished her daughter not to use her phone while eating. The hero replied to his family that all was well. "Have you forgotten what I am capable of?" The woman replied that she was proud of everything her son was doing. On the wall behind her hung newspaper articles with his picture. For a moment, her mother closed her eyes. She was trying to deal with her emotions. When she could speak again, she asked the guy, "Take care of yourself. No parent would want their child to sacrifice themselves for others." The young man couldn't find anything to say to his mother, and a terrible memory arose in his mind. Takahashi remembered burying his dead mommy in a past life. The hero addressed his mom affectionately. No child would want his parents to be upset. The woman wanted to object to someone, but Nozomi stopped her. She said, "Mom, leave him alone, you won't change anything anyway." Belle smiled and added, "Brother, you're too stubborn. Once you get something in your head, you can't change your mind." Tears appeared in the woman's eyes. She remembered her dead husband, because the children were very much like him. Takahashi said, "Stop worrying about me. I'm doing this because I want to." The mother could not find anything to say to this, so she continued eating in silence. The hero looked at his reflection in the glass of water, he thought. In a past life, I failed to save my mom. It made his heart bleed when he thought of it. To erase the past forever, he needs to start a new life. And for that, he needs to get the magic elixir. After finishing his dinner, the young man folded his hands in a gesture of gratitude. He told his family that everything was delicious. Having rested a little at home, the hero did not hesitate to go to the dungeon again. Going down the stairs, the young man was running through possible scenarios of events in his head. System reported, Tokyo Dungeon, level 20, Stubborn Alchemist, Quest, a large wall that defies the laws of physics. Takahashi Yukito saw danger ahead and bravely ran towards it with sword in hand. The monsters resembled something between robots and skeletons, surrounded by a hostile red aura. The young man remembered that the monsters of this floor were composed of inorganic substances. He moved at lightning speed. It helped to attack both monsters almost simultaneously. Yukito remembered that these monsters are dangerous and cold-blooded killers, plus they're not alive. Some of the creatures had wings and attacked the young man from the air. The hero noted that the only thing that saves him is that the monsters act schematically, and he manages to guess their actions in advance. A few swings of the sword destroyed the obstacles in Takahashi Yukito's path. Suddenly, something the young man saw up ahead made him stop. A stocky silhouette of a stone monster appeared out of the darkness. Cyclops had only one fiery eye. The red aura around it gave away the monster's intentions. The young man thought that it would be harder to overcome it. One interesting thought arose in the hero's mind. It's worth memorizing the movements of this monster. Analyzing the monster's actions will help to overcome it. The creature clenched its huge fist, ready to attack the man at any moment. Yukito barely had time to bounce away when the monster's fist hit the ground. The hero had to jump around a lot to keep his life. The physical forces were unequal. It was necessary to act with the help of cunning. The young man decided to use his jumps, looking for the monster's weak spot at this time. Finding the core, he was easily able to overcome the strong but unintelligent creature. After accomplishing this difficult task, Yukito landed on the ground unharmed. The monster fell to the ground behind him. This victory allowed the hero to move closer to his goal. He approached the tall door. Pushing open the door, the young man thought, "The time has finally come. From this day on, I will have a new life." A magical golden glow poured from the gap formed after the door opened. The next moment, Takahashi found himself in a large spherical-shaped hall. The floor of this room was covered with some obscure symbols. The door closed behind the hero's back. There is no turning back now. In the center of the depicted symbols was a giant stone monster, some parts of its body covered with green moss. The creature's shoulders bore the same symbols as the floor. The hero immediately realized that it was an ancient golem guarding the main treasure of this floor. This monster is a level 20 boss. Only by overcoming it will Yukito finally achieve what he wants. The golem's appearance was frightening. Its strength was incredible and its attacks were powerful. But it was for the sake of fighting this monster that Takahashi reached the 20th floor so quickly. Now it's time to act. Attacking the ancient boss, the hero noted that he had a mediocre movement speed for such a monster. The guy jumped up high and struck the golem's head with his sword. Takahashi had a plan. He needs to chip off at least a piece of the monster's armor. This way he can get to the monster's weak point, which is the core, and defeat the ancient relic guardian. Meanwhile, this battle was being watched by a spectator who wished to remain unnoticed. The gang leader's plan had failed last time. Watching the fight from the doorway, he hoped that today the boy would be unlucky. The magic symbols began to glow more brightly, red light flooding the hall. The next moment, something incredible happened. Another monster began to rise from the center of the pentagram. Yukito's eyes went to his forehead. He never thought that the ancient golem would not be alone. The huge creature got to its feet, taking up all the space around it. Its core was blue-purple in color. The hero looked over his shoulder at the door. A single hunch visited him. The appearance of the second boss means only one thing. There's someone else here besides Takahashi. It was very strange, for the young man felt no foreign presence. The hero thought, it was generally worth expecting such guests, but even a newcomer wouldn't interfere in such a battle. Yukito looked around, hoping to see an intruder. The stranger's attack was sneaky, his dagger flying straight into Takahashi's back. Only thanks to his own keen reactions and fantastic luck, the hero managed to notice the danger. One swing of the hero's sword and the dagger no longer threatens him. A battered weapon like a boomerang flies back. Yukito immediately realized that this was all a setup by someone. The bandit leader gritted his teeth. Once again, he had failed to harm that elusive Takahashi. The bandit thought, an ordinary guy can't be such a dabbler of fortune. Besides, this kid has incredible reactions. But the next moment, another dagger gleamed in his hand. The man calmed his own emotions and decided that he had the better advantage anyway. The bandit thought the young man was just an idiot who didn't understand anything. Before the man descended to the 20th floor, he found out that it takes a group of at least 4 people to overcome the ancient golem. He snuck behind the hero to automatically summon a second golem. But unlike Yukito, the bandit doesn't have to worry about fighting these things. They just won't notice him. After all, he has a thief level higher than Takahashi's. The bandit thought, with my disguise skills, I'm perfectly safe. It's worth using a skill called catwalk. The ringleader slipped into the hall unnoticed by the hero, determined to tease the second golem. Thanks to the shadow twin skill, he was almost invisible in space and moved so fast that it could seem as if the person was in 2 places at once. Thus, the bandit decided to take revenge on the hero because to overcome two ancient golems alone, an unrealistic task. Just in case, the leader even brought along an invisibility cloak, a rare S-rank item that perfectly hides its wearer's presence from enemies. Now the ringleader was sure that no one present could detect him. 3-on-1 is foul play, but that's what a thief always does to his enemies. Besides, that wasn't the bandit's entire preparation for revenge. He had treated his daggers with poison. It will also attack the hero, greatly reducing his chances of escape. The dagger flew straight into the back of the hero, who didn't expect danger from this side. The bandit thought, it's worth attacking without fanaticism, just to stump the victim. The weapon flew past the hero's face, narrowly missing him. The attempt to harm Takahashi with poison had failed. The leader was dumbfounded. How could a young man hide an antidote under such weak armor? But it didn't take long for the man to get nervous because he only needed it to keep the hero in suspense. He was now attacking the hero simultaneously with dozens of four-bladed knives. The bandit admitted to himself, "How I love traps of all kinds." The man was confident that he could succeed by working alone. With a sad experience under his belt, he didn't want to rely on a bunch of knuckleheads anymore. The ringleader decided to trust traps that had never failed him before, such as live barbed wire. Thanks to the efforts of the dastardly bastard, the hero was now restricted in his movements. The results of his own labor pleased the bandit greatly, he thought. It's only a matter of time before Yukido gets swatted by the golems. The poor young man had no idea what intrigues were going on around him. The hero continued to confront the two bosses of the 20th floor, trying to break through their armor and get to the nukes, the only weak point in these stone piles. Meanwhile, the bandit decided he had done enough and could now just enjoy the spectacle. But it didn't take him long to rejoice. Suddenly, the leader saw Yukido flying straight at him, thrusting his sword forward. Sweat broke out on the thief's face, pooled on the bridge of his nose. He couldn't believe it was possible. Takahashi smiled and asked, "Have you run out of magic stuff?" The bandit thought dazedly, "How could he see me?" The young man suggested that he should go down. There was no point in sitting there. Without waiting for an answer, the hero threw the bandit's blade at himself and asked, "Do you really like me so much that you decided to stalk me?" The leader was able to escape the danger. He asked Takahashi, "How could you see me?" The boy replied with a smile on his face, "I was helped by my hunting instincts. It's a pretty common skill, didn't you know that?" The enraged bandit shouted, "Stop lying! How can a low-level skill help you find a high-ranking thief?" The hero replied, "Okay, even if it's a lie, what are you going to do? Run away like a scared puppy?" The thief could not tolerate such arrogance from a low-level scoundrel, his face turning red with anger. A vein began to pulse on the bandit's forehead, and he grabbed his swords, ready to lunge at Yukido. The man snapped out of his seat. He shouted that he was better than Takahashi. The hero did not move from his seat. He bravely waited for the enemy to approach. When the two men's weapons finally met, the impact of the metal on metal sent sparks flying in different directions. Yukido stayed where he was, but his opponent was struck as if by an electric shock and thrown to the ground. The hero smiled. He said, "I think that phrase is best left to the winner." What do you think? Takahashi was able to flick his opponent away from him with one swipe of his sword. The bandit was still only interested in one thing. He exclaimed angrily, "When did you know I was here? How did you find me? Was it just a warrior's intuition? You damned lying bastard!" The hero thought he didn't have to explain anything, especially since he wasn't lying. He had activated the warrior intuition skill a long time ago. It helps a lot in battles. This skill recognizes danger in the user's surroundings, but the odds of it activating now are pretty slim. Failure at 99%, success at 0.9%, great success at 0.1%. The hero looked at the system's messages and hoped his luck wouldn't fail him this time. Takahashi smiled. He was sure he would also be lucky this time. The next moment he saw another message. The system congratulated him on his great success. He could see all the dangers in the field. A kind of radar appeared in Yukido's head, informing him of the danger. The bandit was rapidly approaching again. He told the hero that he was too fast for his level. Takahashi thanked his enemy for the compliment and prepared to repel the attack. The battle continued, the bandit still believing in his own victory. He said to the young man, "You are still just a low-ranked warrior after all." The thief thought he was superior to the lad in agility, and there was no surprise in that. Striking again with his sword, he continued to chatter about his talents, adding to them the accuracy of his strikes. Unfortunately, his threats were not idle chatter. The gang leader managed to wound Takahashi. A cut appeared on the hero's arm. Bandit said, "I would like to point out the fact that you have prepared for unusual conditions as well." After saying that, he relaxed and missed the moment his opponent was behind his back. Yukito Takahashi swung his sword. It seemed like just a moment more and he would finally end his pursuer. Unfortunately, the bandit also had a superior set of instincts. At the last moment, he sensed danger. Doing a somersault in the air and miraculously avoiding danger, he exclaimed, "Your situation is still as grave as before." The hero didn't reply anything to this retort. He silently attacked with his sword skill called beasting. This attempt by the lad only made his opponent laugh. The man exclaimed, "Guaranteed attack, isn't it?" He was having fun because he knew how to respond. The bandit used the butterfly dance skill. This technique confused the young man, for now his opponent could be in many places at once. Striking Yukito thought, "Did I miss again?" At that moment, the thief was ready to repeat the attack. He pushed himself off the ground and rushed towards Takahashi. The man said, "These are the perfect conditions for evasion." When two conflicting skills collide, he was rapidly approaching the hero as he continued to prattle on about how in the end it all comes down to status. The bandit's attack was successful again. Now Yukito was also wounded in the leg. The hero exclaimed, "Oh my god!" Now he was even more vulnerable to the thief's attacks. The bandit was pleased with the result of his attacks. He exclaimed in a high-pitched voice, "A slow warrior like you will never catch up with me." Suddenly, one of the ancient golems decided to attack the pesky humans with a laser shot. It was only because of his talent that Takahashi managed to dodge a wound that could have been fatal. The bandit continued to gloat. He shouted, "The 20th floor is a great ride." The man stopped a few steps away from Yukito, making strange movements with his swords. He boasted that he could easily dodge the attacks of the 20th floor boss. This was helped by analysis, as the golem moves in a set pattern. The bandit asked the guy, "You bought that information from the guild too, didn't you?" Takahashi answered nothing, silently fending off another blow from his opponent. The opponent's duel was between two ancient golems that would occasionally ride attacking. Suddenly, the hero felt a sharp pain in his leg. Had his luck deserted him today? He lowered his gaze to the ground and saw the sharp blade of the bandit's trap in his own blood. The young man stepped on the spike. The rogue continued to gloat, happy that his traps were working. He stated with a smile, "There are no intruders on the 20th floor. This means that my victory was predicted the moment I started preparing for the operation." After shouting this, the bandit used the scorpion point technique. Takahashi's confidence in his own strength melted away as he barely had time to block his opponent's blows. After another clash, the hero was unable to stay on his feet, the mana of his opponent's sword throwing him backwards. The blow was so strong that the young man fell and lost consciousness. The sword fell out of the hero's hands and fell to the floor of the room. The young man quickly came to his senses and realized he was unarmed in the face of danger. The bandit shouted, "This is the end!" He was sure that victory was within his grasp. The scum's two swords were rapidly approaching the hero. Takahashi looked really scared. But the next moment, the expression on the hero's face changed dramatically. He showed his opponent his tongue and said he was joking. Yukito swung his hand and activated his trap. At this moment, the bandit was in a purple sphere. The man couldn't believe he was trapped in a gravity trap. The young man asked the bandit, "You said there were no irregular troops before, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Are there any?" The thief caught himself thinking he couldn't control his own mouth. Takahashi said, "The information we possess can only be used in a normal situation. After all, no one expected some idiot to get into a battle with the 20th floor boss. The only thing the gravity-trapped thug could squeeze out of himself was, 'Really?'" At that moment, one of the ancients struck the spot where the bandit was. The hero barely had time to bounce back. All the while, he kept talking. "Because of the double raid, even the management changed," the hero told it with a smile. He taunted the outlaw. "You call yourself a thief, but you didn't even notice the traps?" The bandit didn't believe a word the guy said. He screamed that it was simply impossible. He called the young man a low-level scum who should have behaved like a normal warrior. He didn't notice the danger that was very close by. The boss's blow came right on the face of the bandit leader. From such a powerful attack, the gravity trap burst and the thief fell to the ground. Lying on the ground and barely catching his breath, he whispered, "That hurts." The 20th floor boss picked up the injured man with his giant fingers and lifted him high above the ground. And the very next moment, the ancient golem let go of its victim. The bandit crashed to the stone floor of the hall. His bloody hand trembled. He couldn't believe his revenge hadn't come to fruition. Barely breathing, the mangled man whispered, "How could I have overlooked the traps of a low-level warrior?" Yukito Takahashi replied, "Like I said from the beginning, I was helped by my warrior's intuition." The gang leader coughed, leaving bloody footprints on the floor. Rejoicing in his victory, the hero advised the scoundrel to conserve his strength. The young man added, "If you're still alive by the time I defeat the ancient boss, I'll take you to the police." But the bandit was not as weak as he might at first appear. Catching his breath, he tried to rise, leaning on his hands. He said, as if addressing no one in particular, "Do not deceive me." Due to his luck, Takahashi now had incredibly sharp hearing. He was able to hear that whisper. The next moment, the rogue shouted loudly, "In that case, I'll drag you to hell myself." A moment later, a long ribbon of ammunition appeared on the bandit's body. He exclaimed, "This thing is on a whole other level than your substandard weapon." This turn of events stunned the hero. He confusedly asked his enemy, "Are you completely crazy?" That one really did resemble a man out of his mind right now. He was ready for anything to destroy the guy. Activating the system monitor, he pressed the yes button. After that, there was a massive explosion that blew everything around. The blast wave and the debris it carried on, it also reached the place where Yukito was standing. The floor beneath the hero's feet began to crumble, cracks appearing on it. The young man found himself in the very epicenter of the disaster. There was little chance of rescue. In the next instant, the guy flew somewhere down. He was swallowed up by darkness. Some time passed and Takahashi fell, hitting the stone floor painfully. The young man touched his head and thought it was very painful. As his eyes grew accustomed to the darkness, he tried to see how high he had fallen from. Somewhere high above, the sky was visible. It seemed to the guy that he couldn't get up. He lay there for a while longer and finally sat up. When he looked around, he couldn't believe that there was a secret room hidden here. No sooner had the hero caught his breath after such a fall than he saw a golem flying at him from above. It turned out there was no getting rid of him that easily. Takahashi gathered his strength into a fist and rose to his feet. An unhappy thought flashed through the boy's mind. "I've been stumped?" Hoping for the luck that hadn't deserted him lately, the hero quickly looked around the unfamiliar room. Through a hole in the wall, he saw a ladder and some sort of shiny object. "What is that?" the young man thought. He strained his vision and discerned a chest that glowed with a magical light. Takahashi smiled. "Am I really seeing this?" It turns out secret rooms and treasures always come with the package. Now the hero wanted to get to this room at all costs. Maybe that's where he came down here for. In the meantime, the second golem, which had appeared not without the bandits' help, had also managed to jump in. The room became too crowded. The young man thought that he didn't have enough space to escape from the bosses. He realized that he couldn't defeat two golems at once just by attacking them. There was a need for cunning here. Yukito thought, "I have no choice but to bet my fate on this treasure chest." The hero went a bang. He snapped out of his seat, trying to leap between the legs of the golem that was warding off the treasure. The young man pushed off with his feet and jumped up, trying to cover the distance as quickly as possible. Yukito needs to push himself off the hard surface as quickly as possible, or he will lose his balance and fall. The hero slid onto the golem's shoulder and pushed off of it. A moment more, and he would be on the hard surface of the floor. The treasure chest was rapidly approaching. He would soon find out what the boss was hiding here. It was at this moment that the second boss, who was facing the treasure, attacked the hero with laser fire. Takahashi didn't expect such an attack. He was hit in the back, knocking him off course. The young man couldn't hold his sword and it flew to the ground. The hero collapsed to the floor, coughing blood, shaking. Yukito tried to reassure himself. "It's okay, my spine isn't broken and that's great." The boy looked up and realized that the danger was still very near. The 20th floor boss decided to finish off his victim. He had already put his foot in to crush the young man. This time Takahashi was scared out of his wits. His luck seemed to have deserted him. He was so wounded that he could not even respond from the danger that was rapidly approaching. The next moment, the hero felt unbearable pain. He heard the crunch of broken bones. Yukito's legs were crushed by the giant foot of the ancient golem. A thin trickle of blood dripped from the boy's mouth onto the stone of the floor. He was almost unconscious from the intense pain. He gathered his will into a fist and slammed his hand to the ground, ordering himself not to give up. The hero noted, the pain was so intense that he began to vomit. The young man saw ahead of him such a long-awaited treasure. His sword lay beside the chest, but he could not rise to his feet. The golem wasn't going to stop. He wanted his victim to be and kicked his legs again. Everything in the hero's eyes turned red. He shrieked wildly. The hero now recalled, compared to his previous life, in which he had lived for 70 years? Things are different now. This attempt was very short. Takahashi, despite the unbearable pain and unable to move his legs, continued to crawl towards the treasure. He decided this was his last chance to save himself and help his mom. Through incredible willpower, suppressing the unbearable pain, Yukito was able to reach the chest and open it. Suddenly, a powerful beam of light struck from there. Its source was a blue-colored gem. Takahashi found the strength to smile. He had achieved his goal, albeit in this way. The bracelet that adorned the magic stone possessed powerful mana. It was a dangerous moment, for the golem was about to finish off its victim. We had to hurry, because there were only seconds left to save ourselves. The hero reached out and grabbed the bracelet. He intuitively knew what he had to do. Putting the artifact on his hand, Yukito muttered, "I have it, which means I've won." Fate is still on my side. Yukito has commandeered a bracelet that can help him come out of this situation victorious. The bracelet of changeability is a rare item that can move the wearer to any location. After studying the description, Yukito came to the conclusion that this was exactly what he needed right now. The golem came quite close now and started to just fall on the guy. At this point, the guy tries to activate the bracelet, but the chance of success is extremely small because the artifact is not suitable for his class. With every fraction of a second, the chance of a successful activation increases. The moment the Uji golem almost fell on the guy, the bracelet activated. A block of stone falls with a tremendous clatter onto the spot where Yukito was. Everything froze, no one and nothing made a sound. Suddenly, the bracelet made a distinctive sound. Takahashi Yukito appeared behind the standing golem's back. The guy stabs straight into the stone monster's magical heart. He's bound to win no matter what. The boss activates his laser beam in a fit of rage. The stone golem most likely doesn't realize who is attacking it, and so directs its beam at the second golem lying in front of it. The red beam pierces through its target. It's a very difficult situation. Even though the second golem has been pummeled, it's still alive. But that's no reason to despair, and Yukito is ready to move on. Guy disappears from one place and shows up in another. He wants to kill the first boss lying on the ground. Yukito begins to make his way to the golem's heart to break it. Suddenly, the guy starts to lose his balance, all because the golem tries to get to its feet, thus throwing Yukito off of itself. At that moment, the second boss tries to grab the falling guy. Stone Golem swings in and strikes a blow towards Yukito. Anticipating his opponent's movements, Yukito uses the bracelet again. Once behind the boss's back, the guy tries to break through his defenses. The attraction of surprise begins. Stone Monster abruptly and with a swing tries to knock the annoying guy down. Yukito changes his position as quickly as possible. He'll fight as long as he has to, until my last breath. The stone golem can feel the guy trying to break through his defenses. But no matter how fast the golem is, it doesn't manage to grab the guy. Yukito jumps from golem to golem, trying to break through the defenses and get to their heart. Slowly but surely, Yukito was approaching his goal. Blow after blow, he pierces the golem's defenses and deals damage to the core in their bodies. Each stone golem core has taken a fair amount of damage but still remains intact. Such actions continue for several minutes. Instead of praying for the desired 6 on the dice, Yukito is ready to roll the die until he gets the fucking 6. The golems notice Yukito. This time, he appeared right between the two of them. Yukito won't back down from his plans for a new life. Stone monsters lock on a target to attack. The golems are accelerating to crush the guy. 2 hands, on both sides trying to finish the guy off. Yukito uses the bracelet again. The golems continue their attack by inertia and smash their own cores at each other. The damage is tremendous, but it's still not enough. Yukito reappears behind the golem's back. He uses the bee sting skill and destroys the first core with an accurate critical strike. Immediately afterward, he moves to the second boss. This time, Yukito uses the Storm of Strikes skill. The hit reaches its target and the second golem also gets hit. Yukito was able to defeat 2 bosses in one go. The golems scatter, and the exhausted guy falls from the heights. Yukito tries to use the bracelet for a softer landing, but unfortunately the item doesn't work. The usage limit has been reached. The guy falls into a pile of dust or sand that the stone golems left behind. Yukito Takahashi defeats 2 ancient golem bosses and receives a legendary class item, Elixir. The guy notices something appearing in front of him. 2 legendary elixirs at once. He got damn lucky again. Without thinking long, the boy uncorks 1 elixir for himself. In one gulp, he drinks it down. I wonder what it tasted like. As soon as the last drop entered his system, the fun part began. A magical green light illuminates his body. The shattered legs magically began to heal. Even the smallest scratch on his body miraculously disappeared. It seemed that even his clothes, though torn, had become very clean. It's finally over. Yukito looked like he was once again full of energy and ready for new accomplishments. Everything was working out just fine. He was still alive and had gotten the elixir for his mother. Yukito Takahashi has been awarded not 1 but 3 titles for fulfilling all the conditions. Survivor gives a +10 to defense. Slayer of 2 giants gives a +20 to strength, and Arbiter of the Law gives dexterity +10 points. After a while, Yukito checks his inventory. He is very happy that his scheme has fully paid off and that he has obtained such a rare item. Now it's just a matter of getting out of this place. The guy made it to the very top in seconds, back to the main hall with the boss. Climbing to the top, the boy noticed the bandit's cape. Taking it, Yukito wondered if it would be sufficient proof of the crime. Taking the bloody cape with him, Yukito headed for the exit. After opening the gate, the guy comes home. After leaving the dungeon, he went straight to the guild and told them everything. The employee standing at the registration table was very frightened and went to get the supervisor. As expected, the situation caused quite a stir. The supervisor requested a mini-interview to cover the incident. But Yukito had other non-postponed plans. The guy asked to reschedule. He's in a big hurry. Leaving the guild building, the guy ran with all his legs. Many passers-by were paying attention to the guy. Of course, he was on the news. The man who set the record for traversing 20 floors and defeating 2 bosses at once, all by himself. But none of that mattered at all. None of this is for fame and money. That's it for his family. Yukito has obtained the very precious medicine that can cure his mother. Sometime later, at the hospital, the doctor received the results of the examination. Yukito and Nozomi are eagerly waiting for the results to be announced. The doctor congratulates Mrs. Yuki, she's completely healthy. Everyone is insanely happy to hear such great news. The doctor himself is shocked at how strong the effect of this elixir is, it's unbelievable. Nozomi happily hugs her mother. Mrs. Yuki takes her son's hand and thanks him for all he has done. She's very happy that she's finally able to recover. Yukito, barely holding back tears of joy, thanks his mother, because it was thanks to her and her upbringing that he was able to achieve everything. Finally, he could tell her that. Nozomi was touched by her brother's tender words. He made a big fuss in front of the doctor. You could have said that at home. Scratching the back of his head, the boy partially agreed with his sister's assertion. Wiping away her tears, Nozomi was impressed that over the years Yukito had never learned to see beyond his own nose. Suddenly, everything froze. The whole world is frozen and someone is looking at the Takahashi family through the window at this moment. With the window ajar, a stranger's foot creeps into the chamber. The stranger regrets having to condemn such sincere and pure-hearted people to suffering. A blonde man in a very inexpensive outfit came into the room. The guy is upset because even the fact that this action will be held in the hospital walls, he is not consoled. As the doctors like to say, we did the best we could, but best isn't always enough. After that, the family won't dig deep. Cause of death would be a simple heart attack. The blonde swings his fist right in Nozomi's direction. At that moment, Yukito blocks the attacker's attack. The unknown guy didn't expect this turn of events. Yukito asks what the fuck that bastard is doing. But the blonde man does not answer this question. He was surprised by a completely different fact. How the guy can move. Suddenly, Yukito remembered something. He had seen this man before. Is this really a hero? The strongest of the adventurers, ranked number 1 on the list. He's considered the savior of the world. That's right, Yukito's eyes don't deceive him. That guy is Uyama Kosumarito. By showing an unusual badge, he confirmed that he was indeed a hero. Yukito is even more confused as to why a hero would do something like this. Uyama interrupted the guy. Now it was his turn to ask questions. How Yukito manages to move into nothingness. After all, only those who have tasted death can do that. On that basis, there's only one option. Did the guy get reborn too? If Blondie's so confident about rebirth, then he's the same. It was really true. And since they know what they're talking about, Uyama wants to enlighten Yukito. Blondie came here to eliminate the risk of the end of the world. Yukito began to ask what his sister had to do with the end of the world. She was a factor. More specifically, the negative effect she can have on her future spouse. That's why Nozomi must be gotten rid of. What do you mean, future spouse? Yukito asked. That guy, he's a pretty important figure to their world. Their divorce hit him hard. This will be the root cause of the fall of the world. That's why Uyama arrived today, to eliminate Sister Yukito. Smiling, the blonde expects the guy to understand and calm down. But these words did not calm the boy down, but only agitated him. Yukito began to argue that this timeline had nothing to do with the past. In this line, he was able to cure his sick mother. That's why Nozomi won't go to work in a nightclub to pay her hospital bills. So she won't meet her future husband. Killing Nozomi doesn't make sense. This theory was quite curious to Uyama, but still the blonde man doesn't agree to back down. Instead of believing in theories, it's better to act for sure. Yukito threatens the blonde. He won't even let her touch him. Uyama himself is not happy about this idea. He would love not to have to kill anyone. After all, he only wants to help people. One sacrifice for peace, isn't that a worthy exchange? Yukito won't back down from his words. He will protect his sister. Uyama is not about to give up on his plan either. At that moment, he has a great idea. The blonde offers the guy a battle so he can prove his potential. Yukito doesn't understand why he would do something like this. Yukito must be special, though. I wonder how much risk Uyama is taking by making concessions to him. Yukito doesn't like the blonde looking down on him. But what else should one expect from a hero? Uyama realizes that he is being very rude to another awakened one. But that's because he's actually taller than Yukito. The information window displayed some unthinkable stats. Looking at them, Yukito can't believe his eyes. Where did that blonde guy get those characteristics? Uyama began to slowly approach Yukito. There was nothing to rant about, for the truth was stupidly simple. Without the power, the guy is incapable of defending anything or anyone. It doesn't matter if it's about protecting the world or the people closest to you. The truth will be one. This truth has been experienced by any reborn. So it's time to make a choice. Either Uyama is killing his sister right now, either Yukito accepts his challenge after all. What's a guy to do? Use a changeability bracelet and run away with his family? No, he's gonna find them and get them out of the ground. And just to be with Nozomi for 24 hours, protecting her from possible danger, the guy physically cannot. Eventually, the guy accepts the challenge and is ready to fight Uyama. The blonde had no doubt that Yukito would make the right decision. Uyama calms Yukito down by saying that he's not going to get into the business of beating up the poor guy. Unfortunately, nothingness can only be used for a limited time. 10 minutes, the guy's gotta last that long. If he can do that, he wins. Yukito wondered, would it all start right here? But the hero does not want to destroy the walls of such a bland hospital and suggests another place. Jumping out of the window, the blonde offers to pick a more suitable place for their duel. Yukito looks at the hero, who calls him after him. Looking around, the guy realizes he has no other choice. He'll be sure to protect her. Yukito jumps out of the window after Uyama. A few minutes later in the park near the hospital, this place would be perfect for their battle. Yukito hopes the hero won't be too lenient on him. The blonde smiles. He likes this kind of attitude from the guy. If he insists, it won't be an easy battle. Snapping his fingers, Uyama summoned various runes, apparently denoting the elements of the world. In the same instant, the runes started attacking the guy with different elements: fire, water, earth, and so on. Yukito was surprised, as the blonde immediately started with strong attacks. Didn't even let the guy get ready. Uyama smiles again, for this is only the beginning. After saying that, Uyama summoned his two clones. Yukito didn't expect the hero to have the ability to summon doppelgangers. The guy must be used to it since he's always surrounded by enemies. You think you can do that alone? Yukito asked, opening his inventory. Yukito uses two replacement dolls. Each opponent now has a different target to defeat. The first clash is repulsed, but it was very weak. His puppets proved to be only a one-hit wonder for the doppelgangers. Uyama hopes the kid realizes that you can't win by just defending yourself. Yukito actually realizes this and familiar signs reappear around him. Guy uses the staff of the substance of inconsequence again and summons his most powerful spell. He just needed to buy some time to cast the spell. Yukito pointed his staff at the hero, and at the same moment, a fiery meteorite rushed towards him. I don't think it can be that simple, but the explosion was truly huge. Yukito is looking to stall his opponent, at least for a moment. But suddenly, he heard the blonde man's voice, who seemed to get the gist of what was happening. It's a guy's rebirth gift. If Uyama's barrier is nothingness, Yukito's is most likely a skill of luck. The blonde dodged the attack by setting his doppelganger up for a hit. You can see right through me, Yukito said. I wouldn't say that. I only drew a conclusion based on your recent accomplishments, replied Uyama. It's not funny at all. The fact that Yukito can achieve everything by luck alone. Number luck is as much a part of skill as strength or intelligence. But relying on luck alone is unwise. Uyama summons even more magic runes. He intends to prove that you shouldn't act so recklessly. Suddenly, Various elementals such as waters appear. Green, symbolizing nature, as well as fire and earth. Yukito agrees with Uyama's assertion. It's foolish to rely on luck all the time. But Yukito saw something interesting when he looked at the characterization of the hero. His luck is abnormally low. Yukito doesn't want to do anything that will embarrass him in front of his loved ones. But now is not the time to think about such things. It even scares him a little that he doesn't doubt it for a second. He knows what that's about, though. He'd do anything for them, as they once did for him. The blonde man points his hand towards Yukito and asks if he's ready. And at the same instant, elementals and seals started attacking the guy. The world is cruel and unfair, and it's time for Yukito to come to terms with that reality. The fire elemental is ready to attack. Neither is a waterman. Yukito has a plan. He wants to take advantage of his bad luck. Opening the inventory menu, the guy selects Variability Bracelet again. And at that very second, a bracelet appears on Yukito's wrist. He must overpower the hero due to the difference in their luck. Wristband connection completed. Activation was successful, despite the lack of intelligence and a certain class. Luck is always on his side. Guy disappears from his opponent's view. Somewhere, in the center of the city shrouded by the barrier of nothingness, Yukito appeared in exactly the right place for him. Uyama is surprised to encounter a variability bracelet. Quite a useful thing. But he has enough of the normal magic of flight. Jumping off the back of the car, Yukito apologized, for he wants to continue the battle in this very place. Since Uyama dared to test Yukito, that and Yukito wants to test Uyama in return. A hero wouldn't involve innocent people, would he? Blondie is impressed. It's quite a curious idea. For indeed, Uyama is a hero. His duty is to keep people safe, not to bring harm to them. Well, he won't use mass magic. All the elementals have been recalled. A sword won't do either. But Yukito shouldn't worry about that. Nothing will stop the hero from overpowering the cunning guy. Yukito stashes the sword in his inventory as well. Now he'll check to see how the hero pulls it off and if he succeeds. The guy selects only a shield from his inventory. In his opinion, that should be enough. Armed with his shield, the lad prepared to continue the battle. This sight makes the blonde man nostalgic. In his past life, the hero often fought enemies who used the crowd as a shield. Magical spears have a knack for stalking a target. They carefully avoid all obstacles and try to catch up with Yukito. The guy makes a sharp left turn to hide in an alley. The spear is faster and catches up to the guy, but Yukito successfully deflects it. The shield ricochets and the spear pierces through part of the building. The spear not only penetrated the concrete base of the wall but also hit the gas pipes. Uyama went on again about the very battles when he fought monsters in the guise of humans, or the scoundrels who sow lawlessness in the city. There are more and more of them. Yukito tries to dialogue with the hero, thus clearly trapping him. The boy also began to talk about his past, when he had spent most of his life in dungeons. So the city was just a place to get food. Because of this, doesn't remember much about his past life. Uyama was upset to hear such speeches. After all, he was so eager to reminisce about a past life with someone who had experienced the same things he had. Yukito, on the other hand, doesn't really want to unpack things from the old closet. His past life was like that of a worm mercilessly trying to crawl on the ground. Then you should be grateful for the chance to live a new life, Uyama said. A leg kick lands for Yukito, and he practically gets knocked out from under the car. Yukito keeps saying that he's the kind of guy who's cozier in tight spaces. The hero is outraged. Is he really fighting a coward? Yukito grabs the skateboard, needing to speed up a bit. Uyama can think and say whatever he wants, but Yukito won't fool himself. The hero sees the guy trying to escape again, and it's starting to bore him. After all, he asked to prove to Yukito that he was worthy. But the hero is not ready to recognize a coward who will always run away. At that moment, an obstacle appeared in Yukito's path. He quickly jumped off the skateboard, seeming to be backed into a blind corner. If that's all Yukito can do, then their battle is probably over. Uyama is one step away from striking his strongest blow. Yukito quickly looked around. He sees a lamppost to his left. Well, if that's what the hero thinks, then it's time to act. The guy rushed toward the concrete pillar. With a strong kick of his foot, he hits the concrete product. Uyama doesn't understand what's going on. The lamppost is broken and starting to fall. Time for action, Yukito said with a smile. The hero realized that the time had come and took decisive action. Uyama saw a huge pillar falling on him. He looked confused and even frightened. Assessing the situation, the chief adventurer saw a car moving directly toward him from behind. The hero understood Takahashi's strategy. The young man had cornered him. Yukito watched the adventurer's actions with interest and clapped his hands. He had calculated everything in advance because the hero could not have acted otherwise, so he did everything to ensure that the innocent would not suffer. After catching the pole and putting it on the ground, Cosimoredo said that it was obvious. But the next moment, he admitted that the young man had surprised him. Takahashi smiled and asked, "Really, it was obvious? If that's really the case, you have to protect them, no matter what it takes," the hero added, still smiling. Judging by Uyama's expression, this turn of events had stunned him. The severed power lines were live, and a tragedy was about to happen. Due to the rupture, the entire system began to collapse, and everyone around could have been injured. The pole that had just fallen to the ground was covered in cracks, with golden flashes of electricity visible everywhere. There was no time to hesitate. A powerful explosion sounded behind the chief adventurer. The blonde man quickly looked back, beads of sweat appearing on his face. He had to act fast. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing everything around them. Uyama finally came to his senses and ordered the Undines to extinguish the fire. The magical creature possessing the power of water rushed to carry out its master's order. Takahashi was amused, watching the adventurer's reaction and actions. He shouted that more water was needed. The fire spread rapidly down the street, and the nearest trees were already engulfed in flames. The trees fell directly onto the roadway, destroying passing cars with their weight. Cracks appeared in the asphalt, which had become very hot. The next moment, a chasm formed right in the middle of the highway, swallowing everything on the road. The adventurer could no longer contain his emotions. He screamed hysterically, "Are you kidding me?" Uyama directed Sylph and Gnome to solve the problem. The hero realized that he had to intervene himself. He rushed to the scene of the disaster. The gnome was the first to pull the girl out of the car, which was already falling into the abyss. Sylpha used her magic to lift the car out of the depths of the crevice. The magical creatures rescued the people and their belongings that had been caught in the epicenter of the disaster. Takahashi also decided to approach the scene. He found himself behind the adventurer and, with his usual smile, asked if he had forgotten about him. Cosimoredo exclaimed that he had no time for Yukido now, as he had to deal with the disaster he had caused. The strongest adventurer was sure that the young man couldn't hurt him. Yukido silently activated the system window. He was going to surprise Uyama again. "Perhaps I really can't harm you, but I can create dangerous circumstances," exclaimed the hero, striking his opponent with his shield. Cosimoredo lost his balance. He hadn't expected such treachery. The adventurer in his shiny armor and beautiful red cloak flew straight into the sewer. Takahashi said, "It's ironic that the best of the best ended up literally up to his ears in shit." The hero was glad that the handsome man understood what it was like to be at the bottom. Uyama's face, as he fell into the abyss, was filled with horror and despair. He had no chance of escaping the disgrace. The brown water was very close. The first of the adventurers found himself up to his shoulders in the stinking liquid. Takahashi pointed his flower-adorned magic wand at Uyama and said he wasn't done yet. The adventurer couldn't take the pressure, raised his hands and said he was giving up. He acknowledged the hero's victory. A little later, the fire was extinguished and all the victims were rescued. Cosimoredo sat on the truck, dirty water dripping from him. He confessed to Yukito that, because of his low character, he often found himself in such situations. The adventurer added, "I knew something like this could happen in our fight, but I didn't expect such a crushing defeat." He then admitted that it was the first time so many misfortunes had befallen him at once. Uyama no longer boasted. He was amazed by Takahashi's ingenuity. He reminded the hero of an accident from the past, which plunged him into sad memories. A terrifying image of a powerful explosion in a high-rise building appeared in the young man's mind. The next thing he remembered was a bouquet of flowers and takeout food lying on the ground. Yukito himself was kneeling. He was praying with his hands folded and his eyes closed. These memories from the past were very painful for him, but it was precisely these memories that helped the hero defeat the adventurer in this battle. What's more important now? Have I been able to prove to you that I can prevent the past from repeating itself? Takahashi asked Uyama. The #1 hero agreed, clapping his hands. He jumped off the roof of the truck and threw over his shoulder. "I'll let you stay with her a little longer." Yukito was dissatisfied with the adventurer's answer. Without looking back, Cosimoredo said that, unfortunately, the veil of oblivion would soon fall, and it would be up to him to deal with all the consequences of their duel. The blonde man was referring to the deep abyss right in the middle of the highway. Uyama waved his hand toward the hero and added that he would have to return to the hospital. The adventurer wanted the young man to deal with the curse of disaster. It seemed that Takahashi did not understand what his new acquaintance meant. Seeing the expression on the hero's face, the adventurer was surprised himself. How could the young man not know that it was precisely because of this curse that the tragedy had occurred in that hospital? How can you not know about it if you came here from the future? Uyama asked. The hero replied that this was the first time he had heard about it. This answer made the blonde man smile strangely. It seemed that he decided that Yukito was joking. The adventurer said that this joke was not funny. The young man was not joking. With a serious expression on his face, he folded his arms across his chest, genuinely not understanding what was being discussed. You really don't know about this disaster? Kosumuraido exclaimed in astonishment. He couldn't understand how the young man could not remember the fires and destroyed roads. You see, I spent my whole previous life in the dungeons. I farmed slimes for 10 years, the boy finally explained. Now Uyama understood that Yukito didn't remember everything from his past life. He decided that in that case, the young man couldn't know how to resist the curse. The hero spread his arms. It was the absolute truth. He had no idea how to get rid of this trouble. This news upset the adventurer. He lowered his eyes to the ground and silently stared at his shoes for a while. Finally, the blonde man said that there was no time to explain everything now anyway. Seeing the color of the sky, he realized that oblivion was about to descend. Go to the morgue. It's in the basement of the hospital. When you get there, you'll understand everything, said Uyama. Yukito asked irritably why he should listen to him. The hero replied that he would try to figure everything out himself, but there was a chance he wouldn't be able to. As he walked away from Takahashi, he threw over his shoulder. If nothing is done, many people could die. Hearing such words from the adventurer, the young man was confused. He wanted to ask something else, but Kosumuraido had already taken flight and disappeared into the sky. I don't understand what's going on, but it's better to go back to the hospital, the hero decided. He touched the bracelet of changeability to return to his mother and sister as quickly as possible. The young man made it in time because the next moment the void began to disappear. When the magic finally wore off, people were walking on the streets again. They couldn't have imagined that just a few minutes ago, the strongest beings had been fighting on this street. Yukito made it to the hospital in time. No one in the office could have imagined that he had disappeared somewhere. The doctor advised the boy's mother to have regular checkups. Yuki got up from her chair and promised to follow the doctor's advice. She was grateful for the good news. Takahashi smiled, pleased that he had managed to get the elixir and save his mother. The young man discreetly glanced around the office from under his brow. He remembered the adventurer's words. I don't have time to explain. I don't fully understand what might happen myself. This warning prompted the hero to check the blonde's warning. He headed out of the office, took a few steps to the door and grabbed the handle. The only thing I know is that we can't stay in the hospital, Takahashi thought. The hero was sure that he had to get his sister and mother out of there as quickly as possible. When they were in the hallway, Nozomi said, I'm so nervous that I really want to eat. His mother suggested stopping at a cafe on the way home. She wanted to celebrate her miraculous recovery, but Yukito objected, saying that he would cook dinner for them himself to mark the occasion. His sister looked stunned that her brother would be cooking, as this was a rare occurrence in their family. The young man smiled and said, Why not? I just have one request. Could you go to the store and buy everything for dinner without me? His mother replied that if Yukito wanted to treat them, how could they refuse him? Nozomi said she didn't mind either. Yuki and her daughter headed for the exit, discussing what delicious meal Takahashi wanted to cook for them. The hero waited patiently for his family to leave the hospital grounds. Once he was sure that his mother and sister were safe, he went to check the morgue. First, he went into the men's restroom. He had something to do. Locking himself in a toilet cubicle, Takahashi put on a white hooded cloak. This cloak was magical, a prize from his victory over the bandit Kido. He used it to avoid encounters with all sorts of weak monsters that were not worthy of his attention. The hero did not think that this invisibility cloak would be needed for such a reason. The patient, who was also in the bathroom at that moment, saw the door open by itself and decided that there was a ghost there. Meanwhile, the young man managed to reach the elevator at the end of the corridor. Yukito patiently watched as the elevator slowly descended from the top floor. He wondered why he had never heard of the curse of the disaster. Uyama said that when he got to the morgue, he would understand everything. Finally, the elevator display showed B1. It was the basement floor where the morgue was located. The doors opened, and the hero saw a corridor with many doors. He boldly stepped out of the elevator and headed forward, hoping to figure out where he needed to go. The young man noticed that there was a deathly silence all around him. Could it be that there is something here that will cause a catastrophe? Yukito thought. He decided that first he needed to check if there was anyone alive on this floor. The system's radar showed that there was no one there. This meant that the hero could check everything thoroughly. Takahashi looked ahead, carefully reading the signs on the doors, wanting to find the right one as quickly as possible. Finally, a door with the sign morgue appeared ahead. The moment had come. The young man quietly opened the door. It was dark inside. When his eyes adjusted, the hero could see a tiled room and a row of beds. He saw people lying there, their faces covered with white cloth. "There's a good chance that one day I'll be among them," flashed through Yukito's mind. The young man walked past the bodies of the dead, waiting for understanding to come to him. Stopping at the end of the room, he looked back at the dead. The hero took the hood of his magic cloak off his head and decided to wait a little longer. In the end, he found nothing. Yukito assumed that Uyama had decided to play a joke on him. The young man activated the system window. Suddenly, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. The message was red, which could only signal danger. Takahashi heard some strange sounds, and a red glow rose from the beds where the bodies lay. Suddenly, the body of one of the deceased moved, and the blanket fell from her face. The woman was twisted as if in a convulsion. The living dead began to rise from the bed, a sight not for the faint of heart. Less than a minute later, a dozen zombies began to approach the stunned hero. The living dead began to growl, which was truly beyond the pale. Now Takahashi agreed with the adventurer. He had indeed received a clue in the morgue. The young man held his sword in front of him, preparing to face the danger with dignity. The closer the zombies got, the more the hero felt the unbearable smell of rotting flesh. Usually the strongest seekers challenge the undead from above, Yukito managed to think. The living dead approached, growling and foaming at the mouth like rabid dogs. The first to attack the young man was a woman with long hair. A thought flashed through the boy's mind that this was not some kind of zombie virus. One swing of his sword, and the zombie's head flew to the floor. Yukito came to the conclusion that this was most likely the result of a curse. The first body fell to the ground, but the other dead were already close by. If an adventurer is cursed before death and not buried within a certain period of time, he turns into a zombie, Takahashi recalled. The hero's next blow tore the living dead apart along the torso from the head. As soon as the young man finished off the second monster, a third zombie attacked him from the side. The hero reacted lightning fast, throwing the undead away from him with a kick to the stomach with his right foot. Takahashi realized that the curse could spread to neighboring corpses. Yukito remembered that in his past life, the souls of the dead were pacified with the help of holy power. But in this life, unfortunately, no one had yet mastered such a method. The boy had time to think. It's good that this curse doesn't spread to the living, but that was only if the zombie didn't bite you. Takahashi attacked the next monster by throwing a metal bed at it. The hero had to be very careful not to catch the curse. The young man methodically destroyed the zombies one by one, not allowing them to corner him. The head of another undead rolled across the floor, severed by Yukito's sharp sword. The boy used the beds as shields, thus protecting himself from the zombies' bites. Another undead flew to the opposite wall after being hit by a bed. But there were more monsters, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to hold them back. The young man placed several beds in a row in front of him, creating an improvised fence. He managed to reduce their numbers a little, but the monsters continued to press forward, trying to reach their prey. Takahashi managed to see a talisman around the neck of one of the zombies. It indicated that the man had been a famous adventurer in his lifetime. It is a real tragedy when a hero in the past turns into a real monster after death. Suddenly, the young man heard the door handle behind him begin to move. Yukito realized that someone outside was trying to get in. The next moment, the door opened and two more living dead burst into the room. The zombies fell to the floor, unable to keep their balance, but now the hero was surrounded. Takahashi encouraged himself, saying it would be easy. A second later, the head of one of the undead was severed from its body. The second zombie was still lying on the floor, and the young man did not hesitate to swing his sword. The hero had not yet managed to strike when one fact made him stop. On the system's radar, this woman was marked as a neutral target and glowed green. A second later, the unfortunate woman raised her head and asked for help. She was terrified. Takahashi was stunned by the fact that this woman was still alive. Yukito decided that she was an employee of a funeral home who had come to collect the bodies. No matter how hard you try, you can't turn a zombie back into a human. But if you were bitten recently, there's a chance you can be saved, flashed through the hero's mind. He crouched down next to the unfortunate woman, realizing that he didn't have the tools he needed to help her. Besides, the barricade of beds would not hold out for long against the onslaught of zombies. It was difficult for the hero to make such a decision, but in this situation, letting her die seemed the most logical choice. Now he had to focus on destroying the main threat. Takahashi activated the system window. I don't want to be a hero who is driven solely by efficiency. The time has come to use the Bracelet of Change again. The magical artifact was activated. The system reported its use. To heal this unfortunate woman, he would need alchemical tools. All he had to do was obtain the blood of the one who would consume the potion. The hero remembered the recipe for the elixir needed to heal a person bitten by a zombie. He understood that he was trying too hard, but he couldn't do otherwise. A true hero cannot leave a victim in danger. The young man knelt down next to the woman. He needed access to her hand. He cut the woman's finger with the sharp blade of his sword. In the next moment, a drop of blood appeared on the cold steel. The hero collected it in a special flask in which he would prepare the antidote. All the ingredients had been gathered. All that remained was to prepare the potion. Yukito sat on the floor and slowly mixed all the components. When the last ingredient was added to the bowl, the task was almost complete. The guy was very worried, doubting that he had done everything correctly. The system sent a message, starting the production of the sacred elixir of purification. The next moment, the hero received a warning that his level of alchemy was insufficient. The probability of activation was only 25%. In addition, he lacked the advanced synthesis skill. The probability of activation was 70%. Yukito was also warned about his insufficient magical abilities. But thanks to his incredible luck, the elixir was successfully completed. Takahashi was pleased with the result. He asked the woman to wait a little longer. The hero leaned down and poured the magical elixir into the woman's mouth. As soon as it entered the unfortunate woman's body, she glowed with a magical light. After a few seconds, the glow disappeared, and the woman lost consciousness. Takahashi breathed a sigh of relief, glad that the unfortunate woman had been saved. The young man helped her sit up and tried to bring her to her senses. Now it was time to return to his weapon. Yukito picked up his sword from the floor. It was time to deal with the zombies, because Takahashi still had to prepare the festive dinner. The hero noticed that his makeshift fence was no longer moving. The pressure on it had stopped. The young man peered through the crack. The room was very quiet. Where had the zombies gone? What he saw frightened even such an experienced hero as Yukito. All the zombies were drawn to some kind of black substance. They obediently walked toward it, as if responding to a call. The undead that were already inside turned black, and the monster's eyes and open mouths glowed green. Something incredibly powerful absorbed the undead's magic. A dozen zombies turned into one giant monster. The monster had sharp teeth and dozens of tentacles, and it growled wildly. The beds behind which the hero was hiding flew in different directions from its growl. The young man did not know the answer to the question of what this crap was and how it appeared. Could this also be the result of the curse? It seemed that while he was away making potions, the curse had united and grown stronger. Was this the price he had to pay for sympathizing with and saving those who had fallen into trouble? I wonder if Uyama Kosamurita would laugh in my face if he found out about this, the young man thought. But Yukito did not regret what he had done for a second. He had saved the woman and would definitely deal with this trouble. A giant zombie monster tried to catch Takahashi with its tentacles. Thanks to your lightning-fast reaction, the hero managed to dodge the danger. During this time, he managed to reach the monster. With one swing of his sword, her head fell to the ground. To kill a zombie, you have to decapitate it. At that moment, another tentacle of the monster almost hit the guy. This monster had many heads, and the young man cut them off one by one without stopping. There was still work to be done. As long as at least one head remained in place, the monster continued to live. The next moment, two tentacles reached forward simultaneously, trying to grab Yukito. With a swing of his sword, the young man cut off both tentacles at once. The severed limbs had not yet touched the floor when the hero had already disappeared from where he had been standing a second ago. Rushing past the monster at the speed of light, Takahashi managed to cut off several more heads. He used the same tactic as in his previous life. Speed and precise movements were key. Now he only had one thing to do, simply cut off all the heads. When there are no heads left, the monster will finally be destroyed. After finally cutting off the last head, Yukito hoped that the zombie was finally finished. The monster fell to the floor and showed no signs of life. The hero hoped that the monster would now simply turn into a pile of corpses. But things did not turn out as expected. Yukito's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. The monster began to regenerate, black energy enveloping it from all sides. The monster's head was restored, its eyes glowing green. The young man couldn't believe his eyes. Was all this really happening? The monster's tentacles reached out to the corpses it had not yet devoured. Opening its huge mouth, the zombie threw several corpses into it. It was a sight not for the faint of heart. 2 human legs protruded from the monster's disgusting mouth. In the next second, 3 new heads appeared on the monster's body. The young man realized that the creature was healing itself with the help of the new corpses. Any other zombie would have turned to dust long ago. Something was wrong with this monster. Takahashi understood only one thing. He had to cut off the last head before the monster could regenerate the others. But his warrior skills were geared toward fighting the enemy face to face. The young man did not possess the ranged combat skills that would be very useful now. He remembered that he could use the power of his magic staff. But if Yukito used it, there was a high probability of destroying the entire hospital. Buy some time and wait for the hero? But I don't want to lose to that pompous blonde. The hero continued his musings. Besides, the guy understood that there was no time to wait for anyone. He couldn't wait for the adventurer to arrive. He had to deal with it himself. Meanwhile, other zombies continued to strengthen the monster. When another undead creature entered the monster's body, another head appeared on it in the same second. The giant zombie continued to mutate. The monster must be destroyed before it grows to incredible proportions. The creature growled wildly and once again directed its tentacles straight at the young man. This time, he barely managed to dodge the deadly weapon. The sharp tip moved at lightning speed. The attack was powerful, but it failed to knock the zombie off its feet. Pieces of plaster fell from the ceiling. It seemed that the room would soon collapse. Takahashi wanted to handle it himself. He understood that it had to be done as quickly as possible. If the monster continued to devour its own kind, soon no one would be able to stop it. Yes, the hero understood everything intellectually, but he didn't know who to fight this undead creature. He needed something that could destroy all the zombies in one fell swoop. But at the same time, the weapon couldn't be so powerful that it would destroy the entire hospital. Unfortunately, the young man didn't have anything like that at his disposal. As soon as Yukito caught himself thinking about the hopelessness of the situation, a spark of an idea suddenly appeared in his eyes. The hero glanced behind him. In the corner of the room stood an alchemical bowl. At that moment, the creature reached out its tentacles toward the young man again. With 2 swings of his sword, Takahashi cut off the creature's appendages. The boy decided that the alchemical kit could help him in his fight against the zombies. The main idea was that it could be used for more than just creating medicines. The young man rushed to the alchemical kit, barely managing to hide behind the metal bed. Despite the danger, the hero did not despair. If you don't have something, just make it, flashed through Yukito's mind. In a critical situation, the brain begins to work at full capacity. The young man's gaze caught on the metal leg of the table. He wasted no time and cut off a piece of the pipe with his sword. The young man decided that even ordinary things could be turned into weapons now. The system recorded that 4 legs from the stretcher had been obtained. At that moment, a giant tentacle smashed the fortification behind which the hero was hiding. Yukito smiled and exclaimed, "How impatient you are!" Takahashi decided to use the steel plate. The system recorded this moment as well. In the system's artifact table, the guy activated the shield. "Be a little slower and dumber," said the hero. The young man hid behind the shield just as 3 tentacles rapidly approached him. The shield was light and durable, so using it was a good idea. Now the hero needed a book with various recipes from the alchemy kit. Blocking the tentacles' blows with the shield, Yukito quickly flipped through the pages. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a recipe for black powder, which required potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal. Takahashi was a little disappointed because he couldn't imagine where he could get these ingredients while in the morgue. He could use the bracelet to teleport to a store. But when he looked at the bracelet, the hero realized that its energy was completely depleted. He had been using it non-stop throughout the day. Suddenly, while fleeing from danger, the young man realized that he could create the ingredients himself. The hero's keen eye noticed a piece of wood in the corner that could be used to make charcoal. First, he should focus on the first element. The hero immediately threw the cedar wood into the magic cauldron. The creation of charcoal has begun. The system reported that alchemy cannot help create this ingredient. The probability of success is only 25%. The level of alchemy mastery is insufficient. But once again, thanks to Yukito's incredible luck, high-quality charcoal was created after all. A thought flashed through the hero's mind. There's still sulfur and potassium nitrate left. Continuing the fight, the young man could not even imagine how to find them. He didn't stop for a moment, attacking the monster again and again. Takahashi's next lunge at the zombie monster completely disoriented him for a moment. The guy decided that now was the time to use the power of the internet to get information. The young man asked in the GPT chat what could be used to replace sulfur and potassium nitrate. The next moment, he read that these two components could be found in ordinary matches. The hero's gaze fell on a pot of incense. A thought flashed through his mind. They must have been lit with something, right? Yukito looked at the woman he had rescued. She was still in no condition to help. The young man bent down and picked up her purse. There was a chance he might find something useful inside. After emptying the contents of the bag onto the floor, Takahashi immediately saw the matches. He immediately threw them into the alchemical cauldron to release the necessary components. The system again doubted the success of this task, but everything worked out for the best. Sulfur and potassium nitrate were successfully extracted. Now it was time to create black powder, which should help get rid of the cursed monster. The production of black powder was quickly and successfully completed. Success was once again on the hero's side. But this is not the end. Now it is time to create a bullet. The production of a high-quality bullet was also completed. Soon, the hero will be able to put an end to this story. The young man's gaze fell again on the woman's bag, and he remembered seeing something else useful inside. He quickly approached, opened the notebook, and began to write something. When he was done, Yukito looked closely at what he had drawn on the piece of paper. Judging by the expression on the hero's face, he was pleased with his own idea. At that moment, when the hero was distracted, the monster, which had managed to recover, struck. The zombie growled wildly, confident that the end of its victim was near. It lunged straight at the guy, and it seemed that in a moment everything would be over for Yukito. What is the most effective weapon against zombies? The hero asked himself with a smile. The young man tore off a sheet of paper and threw it into the cauldron. The hero managed to draw a sketch of a pistol, which was essential for using a black powder bullet. In the system window, Takahashi activated the icon with a metal leg from a wheelchair. The alchemical cauldron began to bring the new recipe to life. As always, the system warned that it could not yet create this ingredient. Due to the lack of metallurgy skills, the weapon created may be of poor quality. Despite his lack of magical skills, thanks to luck, the creation of a high-quality, self-firing sawed-off shotgun was successfully completed. The young man did not want to desecrate the corpses of the slain hunters, but what could he do? He could not waste any more time, so he quickly loaded his homemade weapon with black powder bullets. Takahashi aimed directly at the main head of the zombie monster. Today, he would kill the undead creature once again. The boy waited for the monster to get even closer. He only had one chance. The system warning came quickly. The hero's class does not require the use of firearms. Chance of explosion, 30%. But Yukito was already used to relying on his own luck. He was sure it would work. And he was right. The shooting worked. The black powder bullets flew straight toward the zombie. The danger was rapidly approaching, but the monster did not understand how this small golden object threatened it. One bullet hit the tentacle with which the monster had managed to cover its head. But another hit the target, the creature's head. At that moment, the broken shell fell to the floor. The hero noticed that the creature was trying to recover quickly, one eye reappearing. But another ball of black powder prevented this recovery. "Don't even think about it," Takahashi said. This time, he would not allow the monster to regenerate. Another shot blew off several more heads on the zombie's body. The guy didn't stop. He kept shooting again and again. The stubborn monster still didn't want to die. But the hero would get his way. He was a persistent guy, too. Holding two sawed-off shotguns, he rushed forward, firing again and again at the monster's heads. In the silence of the morgue, shots rang out again and again. Another cartridge filled with black powder knocked off another of the monster's tentacles. Another shell casing clattered as it fell onto the tiled floor. Yukito pulled the trigger again, but nothing happened. The system reported that the cartridges were empty. When this happened, the monster lay finally destroyed at the hero's feet. All its heads shot off. The hero carefully examined the result of his work. He wanted to make sure that the zombie was finally finished. Takahashi sighed, finding it hard to believe that the monster was finally dead. The system congratulated the young man on destroying the curse of disaster. He was the first in the world to defeat such a creature. Yukito was awarded the title of Sacred Slayer. The boy tried to believe what he had heard. He was pleased with his own achievement. Finally, this whole nightmare is over, the hero thought with relief. In the complete silence of the morgue, he suddenly heard sobbing. It was the woman he had saved. whom he had completely forgotten about. The young man was pleased that the medicine he had created had worked. Suddenly, the hero remembered that he had something to think about now. He was not a hospital employee. He was covered in the monster's blood, and he was holding two sawed-off shotguns in his hands. How would he explain that? If the young man said he was the one who had returned, hardly anyone would believe him. Moreover, I entered a place where only hospital staff are allowed to enter. This is illegal trespassing. Takahashi understood that he could get into trouble. Moreover, in their world, it is forbidden to use firearms outside the dungeon. This burden of responsibility almost crushed the hero to the ground. But in the next moment, he remembered that he had descended into the basement unnoticed with the help of an invisibility cloak. And now was the time to use it again. As soon as the young man threw it over his shoulders, he heard voices behind the door. A man in a helmet shouted to his subordinates, "Activate the locators! Check if anyone is hiding here. Someone's already here! This is bad," the hero thought in despair. He looked at his discharge bracelet of variability. The young man's stealth skills were significantly limited. The red indicator on the artifact signaled that the energy was almost depleted. Takahashi activated the bracelet with his last hope, begging the magical item to work one last time and transport him away from here. The hero hoped that his incredible luck would not fail him this time. Unfortunately, nothing happened. Had his luck finally run out? This time, things were not going as smoothly as the hero would have liked. At that moment, two knights burst into the morgue. They were armed with spears. 4 more followed behind them, carrying some heavy object on their shoulders. A girl with gray hair dressed in white opened her mouth and yawned. The stranger was sitting in a special place that the 4 knights were carrying. The hero immediately recognized the uninvited guests. They were clergymen. The warrior who entered the room first pointed his sword forward and said, "Lady Naomi, there is a suspicious person here." Without looking up from her phone, she asked if he was an enemy of God. The knight replied that he did not know, but the stranger looked suspicious. With a hint of sadness in her voice, Naomi, the representative of the clergy, said lazily, "Is that so?" She handed the phone to one of her subordinates named Reed, ordering him to follow her through the game level. Naomi forced herself to get off the soft seat she had ridden into the morgue on. Once on solid ground, she folded her hands in prayer. "O kingdom of heaven, bring your servant more loot, i.e., trophies, and may I not meet my doom at the hands of immoral donors." The churchwoman finished her prayer angrily. The girl moved forward, passing by her subordinate knights. The hero stood still and waited patiently to see what would happen next. Naomi was short in stature. She approached Yukido, raised her head, and asked if he was an enemy of God. Without waiting for an answer, she said, "No, you probably killed these living dead." But the little church minister wanted to know how the stranger knew that zombies would appear in the hospital morgue. The girl came to the conclusion that this guy didn't look like a hospital employee. Naomi was surprised that someone could sense the undead better than she could. She didn't believe it was even possible. The hero looked confused. He hadn't had time to come up with a plausible story yet. Suddenly, they heard a voice. "I sensed the impending danger and sent him here." In the morgue, as if out of nowhere, Uyama Kosumuraido appeared in the flesh. Naomi exclaimed, "It's the hero himself!" The girl and her people bowed to the adventurer. "I had to deal with the accidents in the city. Since I couldn't be in 2 places at once, I asked this young man for help," Naomi Uyama explained, winking at Yukido. "So that's what happened." "You asked him," said the church minister, a little confused. Then she said, turning to Takahashi, "Well, if you know the hero himself, I see no reason for suspicion," Naomi added, glancing at the young man, that he also had fairly low karma. The hero was surprised, as he had never heard of such a thing before. The beauty confirmed her words, pleased with the effect they had produced. "I can see other people's sins, good and bad deeds, and digital values," Naomi kindly explained. Uyama Kosumuraido exclaimed with a smile, "That's to be expected from the youngest novice in the church. So she has a rare skill that is tied to one area of activity," flashed through the hero's mind. Naomi was a little embarrassed by the adventurer's words. Then she asked, "Will this young man take part in the sacred battle?" Of course, the girl was referring to Takahashi. It seemed that her question had put the adventurer in an awkward position. He didn't know how to respond right away. Naomi and Yukido looked at him with questions in their eyes. Uyama finally came to his senses and confirmed Naomi's assumption with his usual cheerfulness. Then he pointed to Yukito and, addressing the churchwoman, said that he would be very useful to her. "He will cleanse the walls of the temple from the shackles of evil and bring God's grace," Uyama exclaimed emotionally. Naomi said to Takahashi, If the hero himself recommends you, you will come with me. The girl added that it didn't matter who served her as long as they were useful. Will anyone in this room ask my opinion, or what? The hero exclaimed angrily. The adventurer tried to smooth over the awkward situation and said that Yukito was joking. Then he whispered angrily, "Let's step aside, we need to talk." The young men moved to an empty corner of the room, hoping that the church officials would not hear them from there. "I'm sorry, could you watch her for me?" Takahashi asked. The other replied, "I think you've heard about the temple class change." The hero answered affirmatively, but continued to stick to his guns. He had no intention of going to serve some Naomi. Temple class change is a useful thing for adventurers. If the hero wants to develop his class or conversely change it, the temple will help. In my past life, I was unable to save the temple because of a disaster, the adventurer admitted with regret. Sad memories of the past appeared in the blond man's mind. A frightened church servant lay on the floor, covered in blood. Due to the fall of the temple, the adventurers became weaker, while the enemy's power, on the contrary, increased. Yukito said, "If you know what will happen, then take care of it yourself." The sad adventurer replied that he would gladly do so, but he couldn't. "There are still many threats in our world that I must stop for the sake of a peaceful future," the hero explained. Takahashi did not give up, because he believed that he had nothing to do with it. Uyama advised him to think ahead, because by connecting with the church, he would be able to go deeper into the dungeons. The young man would gain instant teleportation between floors and the ability to pass through powerful barriers. The church monopolized everyone capable of using healing and support magic. They can create more powerful barriers in certain areas. In addition, church officials can move adventurers between floors using teleportation magic. "All right, have it your way," the hero finally agreed. The adventurer couldn't believe that the young man had actually agreed. But the next moment, Takahashi grabbed Uyama by the collar of his cloak. For this service, he wanted the adventurer to swear that he would not lay a finger on his family. "I swear, I'm not going to harm those who are useful to this world," Kosumo promised, raising his hands. The hero suggested that in that case, he would be disposed of as soon as he ceased to be useful. The adventurer said, "Your words sound as if I am threatening you, but in reality, Uyama was just asking for a little help." Takahashi agreed, but wanted to hear more details about what he was signing up for. Just as the adventurer was about to tell him everything, Naomi approached them and asked if the conversation was over. The blond man smiled broadly and apologized for keeping her waiting. The girl replied that it was no big deal, since they had been busy cleaning the place of filth. The next moment, without further explanation, Naomi held out her staff. She pointed it at the hero and used magic to make the traces of the struggle disappear from Yukito's clothes. A few seconds passed, and the young man saw that he was now completely clean. The little church servant jumped into her vehicle and said that it was time for them to go to the nearest temple. The hero was a little confused. He didn't know why this was necessary. Naomi took her phone from the knight and explained that they needed to assess Takahashi's abilities. "There's no point in hiring someone who can't even fight," said the girl, looking down at her phone. The two knights pointed their spears at the young man. Now he had no choice. Yes, go ahead and test him. I have to go now." "Good luck, my friend," said Uyama Kosumo as he disappeared. The hero realized that the adventurer had simply set him up, leaving without further explanation. Yukito said, "I guess I shouldn't count on lunch today." Finally escaping from the hospital basement, after a short journey, the hero saw a church. Accompanied by Naomi and her knights, they went inside. Inside, the temple was much larger than it appeared from the outside. Yukito stopped, looking around. He was curious to take a good look at everything. The girl said it was time to begin the trial. "Your opponent will be an average knight," she added, pointing to a random man from among her subordinates. The warrior immediately stepped out of line. He was a 4th-degree knight. The knight drew his sword. Takahashi kept his eyes on his opponent. The young man determined at a glance that the man was of a higher level than himself. Naomi announced the start of the duel, and the opponents rushed at each other. The girl took out a bag of treats, preparing to enjoy the spectacle. She kept her eyes on Yukito, memorizing his every move. The opponent's swords clashed with a clang. The blow was so powerful that it sent sparks flying. The opponent attacked, but the hero managed to stop him. He noted to himself that the knight was rather weak with the sword. Yukito decided that the church's warriors were more focused on defense. But even if that's the case, with the difference in levels, it seems he fights worse than me, Takahashi thought. Naomi was pleased with what she saw, but decided not to stop there. She would show the young man a glimpse of God's grace. Using her staff, the church minister activated her magic. Naomi exclaimed strange words. Heraclea! Axelor! It seemed as if she was summoning someone. The girl struck the floor with her staff, and her spell came true. The hero's opponent was enveloped in red energy. Naomi enhanced his abilities with her power. Yukito did not expect such a turn of events. Would the trials of this day never end? The magical knight immediately rushed at the enemy, becoming more agile and faster. The boy noticed this immediately, as it became more difficult for him to block the warrior's blows. Takahashi looked at the girl angrily. It was unfair of her. The warriors of the church already have high endurance and defense stats. The hero thought in despair. The young man understood that with buffs to his strength, he would not be able to withstand a prolonged battle. But Yukito was not used to giving up. He looked closely at his opponent's armor, searching for a weak spot. His efforts were rewarded when his gaze fell on the church warrior's metal gauntlet. In a matter of seconds, he managed to see that the knight's armor was not as strong as it seemed at first glance. Takahashi saw his chance to win and attacked his opponent's weak spot. Activating his shield, he decided it would be a sin not to take advantage of this opportunity. A piece of metal slag appeared in the young man's hand, a waste product that appears during the smelting of metal. The hero decided that it would be quite suitable for his plan. At that moment, while the boy was distracted, the enchanted knight flew into the air, preparing to attack his opponent from there. He raised his sword, preparing to bring down an enhancement called the Holy Hammer on Yukito's head. But the hero was not going to be outdone. He also decided to use one of his skills. Pushing off the ground, the guy easily reached the knight's height. The move he decided to use was called beasting. Everything happened so quickly that the church warrior didn't even have time to react. A small metal fragment became a big problem for the mighty knight. Hitting the weak spot in the man's armor, it easily destroyed it. Seeing that his plan had worked, Takahashi put his shield to use, striking his opponent with it. The metal glove on the knight's right hand fell apart, and he could no longer hold his sword. Having lost his weapon, the man fell to the ground. Before the sword could hit the ground, Yukito caught it. The church warrior was defeated by his own weapon. It was a masterful victory. Takahashi was pleased with the outcome of the battle. He had once again proven to himself that he could cope even in a dire situation. The young man asked Naomi if he should continue. The churchwoman applauded and said that this demonstration was enough. The girl smiled, amused by the spectacle of the duel. She said she considered Yukito a skilled swordsman. The hero thanked her, looking exhausted. He returned the sword to its owner, continuing to analyze the duel in his mind. I'm not strong. It's just that the church warriors rely too much on buffs, Takahashi concluded. Naomi immersed herself in her phone game again, saying to the hero, "You're free now. See you later." Takahashi looked at the girl, but she no longer paid any attention to him. He didn't need to be told twice. The guy turned and left the church. Without wasting a minute, Yukito hurried home, where his mother and sister were waiting for him for dinner. About an hour later, a delicious meal was served. Today they were celebrating his mother's miraculous recovery. Nozomi and Yuki's plates were full of golden porridge, but for some reason the third dish had turned black. The young man wished his family bon appetit. He seemed not to notice that his portion was completely burnt. Nozomi clutched her head when she saw that her brother was going to eat it. Yuki suggested that her daughter try it quickly, since Yukito had tried so hard for them. The hero smiled as he watched his mother and sister try his culinary creation. Mother is finally healthy. I was able to do what I couldn't do in my past life, the young man thought happily. We have enough money, so Nozomi, you can enjoy your youth, the boy said proudly of his achievements. But it's not certain that the day won't come when I become unnecessary to the hero, and he will break his promise. Until that day, I must become stronger than him. Only then will I be able to protect my sister, thought the hero, and began to eat his burnt dinner. Nozomi tried to stop her brother, but he said that burnt rice was the most delicious in the world. As long as Uyama Kosamuraido isn't threatening me, I need to deal with the situation at the temple, Yukito decided after finishing his dinner. When the hero left the church headquarters, Naomi was left alone with her thoughts and her hands reached for the phone. She wrote on a forum, "The kingdom of God opens its doors, you just have to repent of your sins." In a moment, comments from other community members began to pour in. Someone said they only believed in the religion of spam. Another claimed to be a representative of the religion of flat-footed people. One girl wrote that human rights activists had no soul, so she didn't believe in God. Naomi looked upset as she read these comments. She didn't understand modern teenage slang. She suddenly caught herself trying to preach to people who were very far from faith. She advised the chat participants to reconcile with God within themselves. The church representative suddenly realized that people don't want to believe. They want to see a sign. They are only willing to believe when they see the results with their own eyes, Naomi thought to herself. The church leader firmly believed that by immersing themselves in worldly things, people only tarnish their karma. But she herself did not notice how she had immersed herself in the world of the internet. Time flew by with her phone in her hands, and dusk fell on the city. Finally, Naomi's patience ran out and she threw her phone on the table with all her might. Suddenly, the girl heard someone knock on the door. A voice from the hallway asked, "Ma'am, may I come in?" The church representative gave her permission, keeping her eyes fixed on the door. The next moment, 4 people entered the office and apologized for disturbing Naomi. One by one, they began to approach her desk. The church minister became nervous. She wanted to know what had happened. The first knight knelt and said, "I need to discuss the upcoming holy battle with you." The girl looked surprised. Was there something wrong with this event? The knight, whose face was hidden by a visor, exclaimed irritably, "We are categorically opposed to including an adventurer in our expedition." The guards, like Naomi herself, saw the young man's karma and believed it was dangerous for all of them. The churchgoer wearily touched her face and thought that, to be honest with herself, she didn't care at all. The girl placed her palm on the Bible lying on her desk. The only thing she wanted now was to deepen her faith and purify her heart. But in the next moment, Naomi remembered that her membership in the temple included the need to resolve internal conflicts, so there was nothing she could do about it. One of the knights continued to say that the involvement of adventurers would not lead to anything good. The girl put on her monocle and agreed with her subordinate's words. She said, "The temple has carefully studied this situation and come to a general conclusion. Groups with a good reputation have a higher chance of survival," Naomi summed up, closing the desk drawer. A moment later, she added that the temple had introduced a hidden evaluation parameter, karma. Now the power of God's enemies depends on it. One of the soldiers exclaimed emotionally, "That's right! That's why only we, God's servants with high karma, have the right to fight." Naomi replied that it was worth remembering how the hero himself had warned them not to rely solely on karma. After her words, one of the knights in metal armor slammed his hand on the table. The churchwoman looked at this nervous man with some alarm. He reacted too emotionally to anything she said. The guard considered all adventurers to be suitable, and himself and his ilk to be righteous servants of God. "Which of us is more worthy of bringing peace to this world?" the angry knight asked bluntly. "There are only criminals among these adventurers," the man continued, poking some papers under Naomi's nose. The girl decided that it would be wiser to agree with him now and told the knight that there was some truth in his words. But in the next moment, she added that she had already given her word to the adventurer that she would take him into her service. Naomi said firmly that she had no intention of going back on her word. The persistent knight was not going to give up. "But you didn't promise to fight together, did you?" The churchwoman immediately understood what he was getting at and pretended to agree with him. Naomi promised everyone present that the adventurers would not participate in the holy battle. "I will do everything in my power to free the temple from the clutches of evil and debauchery," the girl added calmly. Her answer satisfied the knights, and they knelt down and thanked her. A moment later, the door behind them finally closed. Naomi remained alone in her office. Once in the hallway, the faces were happy that their mistress had listened to them. Meanwhile, one of the men thought, "A child who is not interested in politics is very easy to deceive." He was pleased with his cunning and believed that the girl was easy to manipulate. The knight told his companions that they themselves must protect the innocent from the enemies of God. At the same time, he thought that the adventurer should not be allowed to rise even higher. The man told others that Lady Naomi's rise was inevitable, but he himself did not believe it. He wanted only one thing: to receive more subsidies from the temple. 4 fists rose to the ceiling and a cry rang out, "Let us serve God!" At the same time, the city was incredibly beautiful, with delicate cherry blossoms blooming among the tall glass buildings. The wind gently swirled their pink petals. Takahashi Yukito walked down the street, looking at his phone screen. The young man thought in confusion, "I didn't even have time to blink before the day of the sacred battle arrived." The hero was troubled by the fact that he had not yet met with Naomi to discuss strategy. He wrote to her, but received the reply, "My subordinates will explain everything on the day of the battle." The young man tried to object, but never received a response. The young man thought about how he was called the leader of the adventurers, so he was responsible for everyone. Lost in his own thoughts, Yukito didn't even notice when he arrived at the adventurers' headquarters. Subsequently, the hero found himself in the Tokyo dungeon, the first floor of which was called the Indelible Trace. The first person Takahashi met in the dungeon was Naomi, a representative of the clergy. The guy greeted her politely, and the girl replied with a slight bow of her head. The hero looked closely at the church representative's face, not knowing what to expect from her. He noticed that behind Naomi, 4 Knights of Honor were quietly discussing something, glancing at him from time to time. Yukito caught himself thinking that he had a bad feeling about this. The young man moved away from the churchgoers and approached the group of adventurers with a firm step. Takahashi said to them, bowing his head, "You must be unhappy that a stranger has become the leader." "I apologize." The young man thought that all the adventurers present had been working for the temple for a long time, unlike him. One of the young men advised the guy not to worry about it. The others agreed with their comrade because Takahashi had been chosen by the hero himself, and there was no arguing with that. Hearing the adventurer's words, Yukito froze in place with his mouth open. A guy from this company explained that if it weren't for the hero, they would have been sitting in a prison cell long ago. It occurred to the hero that this pompous blonde was behaving like a true model hero. The image of Kosumariota in shining armor vividly appeared in the young man's imagination. "I'm sorry, but will you help me?" "Yes, yes." Yukito remembered the words of the first adventurer, but in reality he had dumped all the dirty work on Takahashi. Suddenly, the young men heard Naomi's words. "Finally, everyone is here. To begin our sacred mission, let's go to the 30th floor of the temple." A little more time passed, and the whole group reached their destination, the church. The church had built temples on every level of the underground. They were considered a safe zone. There, they can offer various services, which usually cost a lot of donations. On the first floor of the temple, everything looks abandoned. This is not surprising, because who would need the services of clergy at the beginning of their journey? The hero watched with interest everything that was happening inside the temple. Everyone present stood in the middle of the pentagram, and in a moment they disappeared as if by magic. It was an incredible way to move, teleporting a crowd of people. One of the knights took a few steps forward and opened the door. Yukito tried not to miss a single step, committing everything to memory. Once outside, he saw something resembling the northern lights above the church roofs. They were in the Tokyo underground on the 30th floor. It was called the Endless Polar Night. Everything around them was lit only by the dim northern lights. The young man remembered everything he knew about this floor. There were almost no monsters and few resources. Strange as it may seem, there isn't even a boss in the Tokyo underground. That's why the desperate group could move on to another floor right away. The hero thought about how adventurers in his time ignored the existence of the 30th floor. Takahashi approached Naomi to find out what their plan was. The priestess replied that their task was to defeat all the demons lurking within the sacred walls of the temple. She added that the adventurers should remain outside until the assault was over. The young man did not expect such a turn of events and was shocked by Naomi's order. The rest of the adventurers exchanged confused glances. One of Christ's knights advised the adventurers not to take it to heart. Another added that because of their karma, it would be dangerous for everyone to engage in battle with the demons. They mocked the adventurers, enjoying their small victory. Yukito tried to quickly figure out what to do in this situation. The young man remembered that the hero had warned him about this. On the day they met, Uyama Kosumo Raito said, "Karma is one of the most unreliable indicators." The blonde man said that there were many ways to lower karma. He believed that all kinds of hypocrites who had settled in the temple were taking advantage of this. The superhero believed that the knights were manipulating Naomi for their own dirty purposes. Yukito then advised Uyama to kill them, and the matter would be settled. But Kosumo Raito replied, "If most of the people in the temple die in an instant, there will be a lot of commotion." Then, in the hospital morgue, the hero clutched his head in despair at the difficulties surrounding him. Now, in the dungeon, he decided to argue and said to Naomi, "We adventurers have our duties to the guild." The young man believed that they could not fulfill their duty carelessly. It would damage their reputation. The other adventurers agreed with him completely. The knights advised their opponents to rely entirely on Miss Naomi's decision. "She will inform the guild that you have fulfilled your duty 100%. After that, you will receive the promised reward. But if anyone objects, we won't hold anyone back," said the crusader. handing Yukito a piece of paper. Almost, he. The hero replied, "Oh, how generous of the temple to pay the full amount for our work, which wasn't even done." The young man smiled as he held the paper, but he clearly did not like what was happening. He thought that, in the end, the adventurers were just reinforcements for the clergy, ordinary mercenaries. They had no say in the matter. One of the knights turned to Naomi, saying that it was time to begin the holy battle. He believed that by joining forces, they would be able to defeat the enemy of God. The girl was under pressure and looked confused, hesitating over what decision to make. The only thing she could bring herself to say was, "We'll go." The adventurers looked confused as they watched the clergymen enter the temple one by one. One young man asked the others what they should do. His friend replied, "What is there to think about? We've done our job." A girl in their group thought it was strange to take money for nothing. Meanwhile, Takahashi caught himself thinking, "I know the future and that these sanctimonious people will perish." The young man hesitated whether to ask the adventurers to save them. Yukito raised his head to the sky, as if expecting an answer from above. The next moment, the boy saw the face of the blonde Kosumarioto against the backdrop of the northern lights. This only annoyed him. The closer Naomi got to the temple, the more her expression changed. It became determined. Soon, the church with a group of knights was inside the temple, and the doors closed behind them. Naomi was walking ahead when she suddenly stopped, seeing something impressive. The sight was truly stunning. On a pedestal stood a monument to a woman whose legs were bound with something black. Various demons knelt near the idol. The monsters did not immediately sense that someone was watching them. The next moment, the demons, gargoyles, and werewolves began to turn toward Naomi. The churchgoer was surprised that the monsters were in no hurry to attack. The girl remembered the moment when she and the knights and adventurers had just arrived on this floor. Naomi thought that there were almost no monsters on this floor. Suddenly, her knights, without waiting for orders, rushed forward. "The monster still hasn't noticed us and has his back turned. We need to kill him before he turns around." The knights ran toward the monsters with the name of God on their lips and their swords drawn. But something was clearly wrong. There was a demonic energy in the air. It spread throughout the hall from the idol. Suddenly, the face of the monument began to change. A black hole formed in place of its mouth. It seemed as if something inside wanted to break free. A powerful demonic energy was hidden inside the deity. The Knights of Christ stopped in shock. They did not expect God's enemy to appear here. As servants of God with pure souls, they should not have encountered evil. The guards came to the conclusion that this could only have happened in one case. There was a person with low karma among them. One of those who hid his face behind a visor was not honest with his friends. He spent the company's money and thought it didn't count. The man understood that money was evil, but when someone gives you a gift, you have to accept it. For example, he received a premium melon for winning a gluttony contest. The knight believed that adultery was a sin, but divorce and remarriage were normal. He often changed partners. The man understood that if Saint Naomi found out about his true nature, it would be the end of him. The guard was sure that his brothers would also be unable to keep the faith. The knight constantly violated God's commandments, so his karma had significantly declined. He was sure that one small sin would not ruin anything. Suddenly, the man heard Naomi say, "That means the hero was right after all." All the evil spirits in the hall finally turned their attention to the churchgoers. The girl loudly struck the floor with her staff, attracting the attention of others. She exclaimed, "We'll leave the search for the culprit for later. Right now, you need to focus on the enemy in front of you." The knights agreed with the saint. Now they had to deal with the urgent task at hand. "As long as Lady Naomi is on our side, we have nothing to fear," exclaimed the warriors of Christ. With these words, they rushed into battle. Naomi closed her eyes, concentrating on prayer so that her power could overcome the demonic energy. One of the knights was the first to attack the green goblin. Suddenly, the man felt the pressure of enemy magic on him. The dark mage seemed to hang in the air, directing his spells to protect the goblin. The warriors of Christ suddenly realized that these were unusual monsters. The people understood that these monsters were very different from those they had encountered before. Naomi advised her subordinates not to rush to conclusions. All these monsters live on the 30th floor, and their squad has reached the 40th floor, so they will be able to overcome this evil. After these words, the church knights felt empowered. Green energy from the saint's staff descended upon the warriors of Christ. Clutching their swords, the men believed that they were much stronger than the monsters. With new strength and faith in their own abilities, The warriors rushed at their enemies. Meanwhile, the enemy of God continued to intensify his attacks on the churchmen. The idol's stone continued to crumble, revealing the red demonic essence hidden inside. At that moment, the monsters felt the support of their master. Red energy swirled around them, enveloping them in black magic. One of the giant orcs rushed forward and brought his weapon down on the knight's head. Now the forces were unequal. The warriors of the cross were significantly weaker than the demons. The people were demoralized. They had never seen anything like this before. Naomi's mind raced. With every adventurer I save, my divine essence grows stronger and my power increases. The churchwoman thought about this as she faced incredible danger. Is it only humans who gain new abilities by increasing their level? At that moment, two monsters attacked one of Christ's warriors at once, and he began to retreat toward the wall. The wolf reached its prey first, sinking its teeth into the knight's arm. Naomi saw everything, her eyes nearly popping out of her head. Another subordinate of the churchwoman fell into the hands of a giant orc. These monsters seem to be doing everything they can to drain my mana, Mrs. Naomi thought in despair. The warriors of Christ already doubted their own victory. They understood that the forces were not on their side. The green light of the saint's staff was growing dimmer, as if it were being swallowed by darkness. The enemy of God was growing stronger, as if possessing an endless source of demonic power. The idol's eyes burned brighter and brighter, and dark mana burst from its mouth. Suddenly, Naomi realized that the monster was amplifying the fear and doubts of those present. The saint closed her eyes, trying to calm her own emotions with the power of prayer. A moment later, she looked at her opponent again with a clear understanding of what needed to be done. Without sacrifices, they cannot be defeated. This place must become an altar for the clergy. I will use the magic of atonement. Clear a path for me to the statue of the goddess. I will give all my strength to the last drop of blood, the holy girl exclaimed resolutely. Naomi had made up her mind and now waited for an opportunity to reach the pedestal. The knights rushed to carry out the holy churchwoman's order. Let us show the enemies of God the power of our faith, the men shouted, swinging their swords. The monsters waited for their opponents to approach. Each of them was shrouded in red mana. The first to stand in the way of Christ's warriors were the werewolves. One swing of the sword and the visor with the yellow cross was covered in blood. Unfortunately, it was not the blood of their enemies. One of their brothers had been crushed by a giant. The other knights froze in place, shocked by the death of their comrades. The werewolf's eyes burned with demonic fire, and the blood of Christ's warrior flowed from its mouth. The clergymen were completely demoralized by what had happened before their eyes, and Naomi's strength was rapidly fading, and her guards fled. The saint tried to rally her knights, but it was useless. The men had already reached the doors and were trying to leave the temple. In response to all of Naomi's attempts to stop them, one of the knights exclaimed, "No gods can save us from death." Now the men realized that they were trapped. The doors were closed. The church minister looked at her subordinates in surprise. Why did these people turn away from God so easily? The girl's hands, which were holding the staff, trembled. She could not understand why the knights had lost their faith while she, still a child, was ready to sacrifice herself. In this dangerous situation, Naomi was left alone against her enemies. She was able to admit to herself that she also did not want to die in vain. Meanwhile, a crowd of adventurers stood on the street near the temple. People were chatting casually with each other, but the hero couldn't come to terms with his conscience. I don't believe in manipulation and persuasion. Maybe plain honesty will work. Yukito turned to the other adventurers. Friends, although we have fulfilled the request, I ask you to help clean up the temple. Knowing the saint's future, the hero could not do otherwise. Takahashi added that there was no time to return to the guild and create a request for a cleanup. The young man asked the adventurers to take this as a personal request. After intense pause, one of the guys said, "If the hero chose you, you wouldn't try to deceive anyone." But another couldn't understand why Yukito would help these sanctimonious people. The hero replied that he didn't care, but Uyama was unlikely to have sent him to help the clergyman for no reason. It was a clever manipulation on Takahashi's part. His reminder about Kosumoraito made the team members think. The young man decided that it was also worth remembering the naive child who could not be left alone with danger. The image of a confused Naomi appeared in the minds of each of the adventurers. The boy called the knights despicable and assured the guild members that the holy child was in danger. These words had exactly the effect the hero had hoped for on the adventurers. "If the hero himself sent you here, then we will help," one of the guys said cheerfully. And the red-haired girl added, I don't care about those paladins either, but I want the girl to be safe. Yukito could hardly believe his ears. He hadn't expected everyone to agree so quickly. He sincerely thanked the adventurers. They no longer hesitated and immediately headed for the closed temple. The group of desperate people quickly approached the church gates. The adventurers couldn't even imagine what awaited them inside. Takahashi looked back and thought, "It's unbelievable, no one left." The hero's popularity worked in my favor. Yukito was the first to reach the temple. He touched the door and immediately felt the evil and despair that reigned behind it. He asked the other guild members if everyone was ready because he was going to open it. The door had not yet opened, but the hero's face was already covered in sweat. Powerful demonic energy was seeping through a small crack. What the adventurers felt did not bode well. One of the guys said, "Even though the doors are closed, you can still feel the murderous aura inside." Another added that such a risk was not worth any amount of money. The next moment, the two left, not wanting to die here. One of the girls watched them go, but couldn't decide what to do next. After thinking for a moment, she apologized and ran after her friends, who had already moved a considerable distance away from the temple. Yukito noticed that half of his team had dropped out without even seeing the danger. The guy glanced at the remaining members. Takahashi wasn't sure if these four would enter the temple with him. The hero touched the door again, realizing that he couldn't blame anyone. Now the adventurer remembered his sister, Nozomi. "If it weren't for my fear for my sister, I wouldn't have come here myself," the hero admitted to himself. Suddenly, a hand rested on his shoulder. Yukito was named the leader. One of the remaining guys smiled sincerely. The red-haired girl said that they needed to create a mood for victory. This attitude of the rest of the team encouraged the hero. The moment the temple doors opened, the Knights of Christ lost their balance. The path to salvation for one of the men was blocked by the adventurer's boot. "I see you're having some trouble." Naomi had already given up hope of rescue, but suddenly she heard a familiar voice and looked back. Takahashi said with a smile, "The wicked have come to the rescue." The saint looked stunned. She could not have imagined that it would be the adventurers who would come to her aid. The knight lying at Yukito's feet exclaimed, "You, people with wicked souls, cannot go any further." The warriors of Christ were convinced that with the adventurers' arrival, the enemy would become even stronger. The hero asked in surprise if this statue was indeed their enemy. One of the knights tried to resist the newly arrived adventurers. He did not give up. Looking at one of the man said that he had been tried for theft. It turned out that the red-haired girl had previously worked as a prostitute. Takahashi prepared to listen to his hidden secrets, which the clergyman could see in the depths of the guy's soul. The next moment, the hero couldn't hold back and exclaimed, "Shut your filthy mouth, hypocrite! If God blesses only those who live without sin, then why did Christ make a tax collector an apostle? Why did Shinran preach that it is sinners who will be saved?" With his next question, the hero struck Naomi to the core. The young man's words made Christ's knights think. Takahashi had now settled into the role of leader. His well-chosen words encouraged the other members of the expedition. "Now we will show you that a person can start over at any moment," Yukito said confidently. Everyone would see the true strength of adventurers who move forward, making mistakes again and again. Naomi was still silent, unable to find a response to the hero's words. The churchwoman kept her eyes on the adventurers, while danger lurked behind her. Yukito rushed forward, and with one precise strike of his sword, the werewolf fell to the floor. The young man exclaimed that they should leave the talking for later. First, they needed to survive. The leader of the adventurers used his staff, and at that moment an explosion rang out in the temple. The monsters did not expect such a turn of events. Naomi raised a clear bottle of blue elixir to her mouth and swallowed the liquid. Then the church warden exclaimed, "The monsters are much stronger than those on the 40th floor. They cannot be defeated with magic items." The hero concluded that in that case, the only option was to fight the enemies face to face. Having restored her strength with the help of the magical elixir, Naomi was able to strengthen the adventurers. This was necessary because red demonic energy was rapidly spreading throughout the temple. The green goblins growled when they saw the adventurers rapidly approaching them with weapons in their hands. Two guys ran side by side toward the enemy, exchanging glances. Another young man simultaneously released 3 swords toward the enemy. One of the adventurers' weapons hit the green giant right in the eye. At that moment, another attacked the monster from behind. Overcoming another werewolf, Takahashi thought that Naomi was doing a great job of supporting him. If everything had gone according to the hero's plan from the start, we would have easily cleared this place, the hero continued to ponder. But now there were half as many adventurers left. Would they be able to break through? Yukito said to the others that there were too many monsters. He asked if anyone had any ideas on how to defeat them. Nomi exclaimed that she was going to use atonement against the statue. The leader of the adventurers understood what she was talking about. He glanced quickly at the churchwoman. Atonement is the only combat spell of the Holy Maiden class. It converts life force into magical energy and literally wipes the enemy off the face of the earth. But the price for destroying a boss of this level will be too high. Using such a spell, the Holy Maiden would sacrifice herself. She would die. This information shocked Yukito. The young man asked Miss Naomi if she was sure about this. The girl said, "I have always been ready to give my life to defeat evil." No wonder this child was considered a saint. She was truly ready to sacrifice herself. Takahashi shouted to the knights and adventurers, "If we continue to fight them one by one, we will not win this battle." The young man understood that they needed to clear a path for the Holy Maiden to the statue. At that moment, Naomi was surrounded, and the boys were determined. The demon understood what was happening, so he tried to stop them. The dark deity once again strengthened his minions so that they could protect him from the Holy Virgin. The adventuress held a magic pentagram, trying to help her friends. Everything around Naomi glowed with a golden light. Behind her, one of her knights protected the church. Takahashi managed to wound the giant orc. The Knight of Christ also accurately attacked one of the monsters. A few minutes passed, and 3 monster bodies lay on the ground. Brave little Naomi rushed toward the pedestal. The girl froze, staring at the terrifying bloody idol. Without looking back, the church minister thanked the adventurers for their help. Now it was her turn to work. The girl closed her eyes and began to pray. "I am Indira's arrow, the thunder of the Lord. Let my flesh become the salt of the earth and let the divine enemy fall," whispered the girl. Takahashi froze in place. He couldn't take his eyes off the fragile figure of the church servant. The little girl looked confused, her face covered in sweat, but she continued to do her job. Naomi couldn't have imagined it would be so difficult. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling as they held the magic wand. The next moment, either the girl's vision deteriorated or she began to split into atoms. The churchgoer's eyes were wide open. She felt as if she was about to lose consciousness. Naomi already imagined herself lying unconscious on the ground, living out her last seconds. She herself could not answer why she was trembling so much. The next moment, something incredible happened. The hero tried to stop the inevitable. He covered the saint with his body. Yukito asked, "When you saw the face of death, did you feel fear for your life?" The girl cried. She didn't know the answer to that question. The hero put his hand on her head, wanting to calm her down. He added that it was normal to be afraid of death. Christ also cried out desperately before his execution. He too was afraid of losing his life. The hero's words moved the church servant, and tears flowed from her eyes. Yukito asked with a smile, "Does that really humiliate him in your eyes?" The girl replied, "As a saint, all I can do is sacrifice myself to defeat the enemies of God. I am incapable of anything else." The young man disagreed, believing that there was something else she was capable of. At these words, a spark of hope appeared in the churchgoer's eyes. "A holy virgin must pray to God for salvation," Takahashi reminded her. Tears flowed from the beauty's eyes again. She was stunned by what she had heard. "All the years I followed the holy scriptures, my faith never wavered, and my life was righteous," Naomi thought, confused. True prayer is when, faced with injustice, you rely completely on God's will. Naomi fell to her knees, believing the words of the leader of the adventurers. Folding her hands, she began to pray fervently to God for salvation. The churchgoer caught herself thinking that until that moment, she had known nothing about true prayer. Everyone present froze in amazement. They saw a symbol with divine greenish energy appear above the girl. The red demonic mana began to disappear, and everything around was gradually filled with a joyful glow. The statue began to change its appearance, turning into an ordinary stone. Ms. Naomi opened her eyes and looked in amazement at the pedestal with the idol. There was no trace left of the demonic idol. The hero said to the girl that she had done a wonderful job. "Ask, and you shall receive." Yukito recalled another phrase from the Holy Scriptures. The young man was sure that 2 things were necessary to change his profession. The first thing that was indispensable in this situation was the priestess's prayer. The second thing that was needed now was an altar for the deity. The other members of the Adventurers Guild present in the temple continued to hold back the enemy. Under normal circumstances, an adventurer would not be able to change professions in the middle of a battle. Takahashi thought. The young man understood that the holy altar was now under enemy control, but a plan was slowly forming in his head. The hero knew that he was now an exception to the rules, so everything had to work out. He activated profession change. The system began to analyze the ownership of the altar, trying to figure out who would prevail. Humans or monsters? When the analysis was complete, Yukito received the answer. The altar was under human control. Now, new opportunities opened up for the guy. He could choose a profession right now, in the heat of battle. To obtain the Berserker profession, you need to kill an enemy that is strong enough. Skills: Giant Loner and Double Kill. A paladin is someone who tastes the fog and pulls out poisonous ears of corn. The condition for obtaining this profession is karma of at least 200. The fighter must prove himself in the fight against the undead. Another option that the system offered Yukito was Jester. It was a dark horse, and the system kept the conditions for obtaining this profession a secret. Seeing the change in professions, Naomi was stunned that the system had activated even in a temple captured by the enemy. The hero explained to the girl that all this was only possible thanks to her prayers. The girl exclaimed, pointing her finger at the screen, "The choice is obvious. To serve me, you should choose Paladin." The churchwoman said that paladins possessed healing magic and the highest defense. Moreover, few in the temple could boast of such a profession. The saint tried with all her might to persuade the hero, but he replied that he did not want to be tied to the gods and turned down the profession of paladin. The next moment, the young man made a choice that completely baffled Naomi. Takahashi loved being unpredictable and hated obeying orders. The profession change was activated instantly, and everything around him was bathed in a golden glow. Yukito closed his eyes, absorbing the new knowledge into his brain. Of course, he chose the profession of Jester. A purple pattern appeared on the boy's face. Naomi exclaimed in despair, "Why did you choose the worst profession out of all the ones offered?" Even in his past life, no one had ever chosen this profession. Jester was ranked first among the least popular professions. All of a jester's skills are based on probability and luck. The people who did choose this profession couldn't understand its essence and constantly lost. After thinking it over, Yukito decided that he needed a profession like this, one connected with luck. The jester's secret skill was finally revealed. Brilliant flash. The hero turned to Naomi as he could use some reinforcement right now. The priestess immediately rushed to her staff. She stood up and returned to her prayer, thus activating her own divine powers. The hero thought, first, the boost gives a bonus to attack power and critical damage. Second, his title of Holy Assassin gives him a 30% bonus to attacks against undead. Third, activating Crushing Blow significantly increases critical damage. The young man had high hopes for the newly acquired skill, Bright Flash. The demonic spirit, which still remained in the statue and strengthened its own retinue, watched the actions of its opponents. The hero did not hesitate and used the flash. The next moment, the system announced that the next attack had a 5 to 10% chance of dealing 10 times the damage. This ability would last for 1 hour. Takahashi's sword blazed with fire, and the young man managed to notice the horror in the demonic creature's eyes. Because of her fear, she strengthened her own magical influence around her. Yukito pushed off the ground with his feet and attacked from the air. As he attacked the demon, the boy said, "Have you heard? History remembers slaves who became kings." The leader of the adventurers managed to see his own reflection in the frightened eyes of the dark eidolon. In the next moment, he brought down a crushing blow with his sword on the monster's head. The blow was so powerful that the stone statue shattered into pieces. Seconds after the attack, the hero landed on solid ground. With a smile, the young man said that now history had met the jokers who had challenged the gods themselves. The emotions Naomi was feeling now were written all over her confused face. The adventurers rejoiced that the leader of the monsters had been destroyed. Now, it would not be difficult to defeat the monsters. The demonic creatures were no longer receiving reinforcements, which boosted the morale of the churchmen. The defenders of Christ and the mercenaries rushed forward, wanting to clear the temple of the enemy as quickly as possible. A few minutes later, the task was accomplished. Everyone stopped to catch their breaths. The adventurers rejoiced that the battle was over and that there had been no casualties on their side. Lady Naomi still couldn't recover. She froze in place, trying to control her emotions. Suddenly, the girl sensed something and quickly looked back. She saw a magical glow pouring from the windows. Takahashi managed to change his jester mask and was pleased with his work. The system congratulated the hero on defeating Baal's doppelganger. He received a new title, Killer of Dark Gods. As a bonus, he received a 50% increase in damage to undead creatures. Yukito's rank increased, and his crushing blow skill evolved into absolute destruction. While the young man was reading the system update, he paid no attention to the priestess. When he looked at the girl again, he noticed tears on her face once more. The priestess was rejoicing in their victory over the undead. Now the temple was under the complete control of humans. The temple doors swung open. Bright light poured into the darkness of the room from outside. Through the window, decorated with colorful stained glass, the sun's rays penetrated inside, painting the gloomy hall with all the colors of the rainbow. The hero enjoyed the light, but the little church caretaker looked puzzled. People smiled as they looked at their weapons, which caught the cheerful glints of the rays. Finally, they had achieved their goal, and now the temple was free of evil spirits. Suddenly, this solemn moment was interrupted by someone's voice. 3 adventurers approached through the half-open door and asked those present if everything was all right. Takahashi replied, "Yes, we managed somehow. You've been waiting here all this time, right?" One of the guys replied that he couldn't participate in the battle, but tried to provide backup in the rear. "We sent a request for reinforcements to the Adventurers Guild," added another young man. But now the trio realized that there was no need for that, as the heroes had dealt with the threat at the highest level. Yukito suddenly felt how tired he was. The young man said, "Even if you just escort us back, that would be a big help." The adventurer with the Kara hairstyle drew Takahashi's attention to something important. The hero saw figures sitting on their knees. It turned out that some of the knights had tried to escape during the battle. The adventurers on duty outside decided to detain these deserters. Takahashi looked at Naomi and said, "According to the rules of the church, she punishes her own people herself." The girl bowed to the adventurers who had detained the fugitives and thanked them for their help. The deserters trembled with fear, beads of sweat appearing on their faces. The priestess promised everyone present that the traitors would be punished. The other knights who remained loyal to the church took the deserters into custody, pointing their spears at them. Takahashi said, "Well, the main business here is settled. Can I leave the rest to you?" The young man needed to return to the Adventurers Guild to report something. Naomi didn't mind finishing everything herself. Without looking back, the hero raised his hand in farewell and headed for the exit with his colleagues. Suddenly, the cry of a churchgoer made him stop. Yukito asked what had happened. The girl asked if she could ask him something. "You said you are not a believer, but you know the sacred texts well. Why did Christ make a tax collector his apostle? Even Christ was afraid of death before his execution and cried out in despair, right?" The girl said quietly. "Why did my parents teach me that it is sinners who will be saved?" Naomi wanted to know where he had learned this. Takahashi smiled, but did not rush to answer. After a pause, he said that it was just old habits left over from his past life. The churchgoer looked stunned by this confession. The hero remembered how he used to help religious people distribute food. That's where he became acquainted with the sacred scriptures. All he had to do was show that he wanted to study the sacred texts, and the young man would receive an extra portion. Delicious desserts appeared on the table in front of him. But of course, you can't say that out loud. Outside, near the church building, everything was as usual. The sun was shining, people were walking around. No one suspected what had happened a few floors below 15 minutes earlier. When the adventurers left, Naomi was left alone with her problems. Now she had to decide how to punish the knights who had deserted. They shed tears and begged for forgiveness. Their remorse seemed sincere. The men said they understood their mistake and begged Naomi to show mercy. The head of the church folded her hands as if in prayer and said, "Of course, our merciful God will give you a chance for redemption." A glimmer of hope appeared in the traitors' eyes, but they would not easily atone for their guilt. Behind bars, they would have time to reflect. Naomi believed that knights should be punished according to the laws of the world for their sins against people. Get more Phrysis, a sermon in the savannah. The head of the church said to herself, "They say the prophet is from East Africa." While the girl was considering the punishment, the unfortunate traitors watched her closely. Her aura turned a threatening purple color. "If your lust causes you to stumble, you will have to remove its source," Naomi said with a terrifying smile. And one of the knights found himself on the surgeon's table. When the punishment was over, the girl took off her headdress. She said, surprising her assistants with these words, "Now it's my turn to be punished." The knights cried out, "My lady, please reconsider. You are very young and not guilty of anything." The men believed it was their fault, for they had failed to eradicate the evil around her. Naomi continued to remove her sacred robe. Before God, age does not matter. I am guilty of the sins of indifference and laziness, said the girl. Now she looked like an ordinary schoolgirl. She decided to resign as head of the church and start from scratch as a student. The defenders of the church wept like children. They begged Ms. Naomi not to leave them. But the girl paid no attention to the knights. She boldly stepped away from the temple. Looking up at the blue sky and seeing the white doves, the girl thought, I need to learn more about this world. Naomi recalled the events of the past day and the victory over God's enemy. A scene appeared in her mind of how the adventurer had defeated the monster. The beauty came to the conclusion that she needed to learn from this good Samaritan. The girl firmly decided to find Yukito Takahashi. Meanwhile, the hero, unaware of anything, sat quietly at home watching television. Suddenly, the guy heard someone knocking on the door. He hurried to the hallway to open the door and see who had come to visit him. When the hero saw the uninvited guest, his eyes popped out of his head. Naomi was standing on the doorstep. The blonde asked with a smile if Yukito believed in God. She was holding the Holy Scriptures in her hands. The guy looked disappointed. He almost cried when he saw the church minister. The girl found herself in his hallway without an invitation before the young man closed the door and exclaimed, Don't brush me off, let's at least talk. Takahashi wanted to know how she did it. Naomi explained with a smile, Magic without an offensive effect is allowed to be used on the surface. Only now did Yukito realize that it was a speed buff. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the hero's apartment. The guy's mother came out of the room and greeted the guest. The churchwoman did not lose her composure and introduced herself. Hello, I am Naomi Nameless, Yukito's junior comrade. The hero asked the girl not to lie, because she was a priestess. To which the girl replied that she was a human being first and foremost. For a moment, silence reigned. The hero's mother and Naomi looked at each other with interest. Yuki suddenly turned to the guest. Naomi, I feel like I've seen your face somewhere before. The woman had not yet received an answer when she suddenly remembered something. That's right, Yukito. She's a volunteer from the food bank, said Yuki. Mom remembered seeing Naomi on the street once. I think she was the leader, even though there were only adults around, said the woman. The church worker explained that it was part of her department's volunteer work. The young man smiled. His eyes softened, and he thought, So they were helping us. The hero softened and invited the girl into the room. Yuki said she would go make tea. Yukito wanted to know how Naomi found his address. The girl explained that she had received this information from the hero. Takahashi thought irritably that Kosumuraito was also a chatterbox. The tea was brewed, and the young man accompanied his guest to the kitchen. Now he wanted to know why the girl had come. After a short pause, Naomi finally said that she wanted to throw a party with Yukito. The girl's statement literally stunned the hero, but he quickly recovered and looked at his mother. Sure, now I can throw a party. The boy was happy that his beloved mother had finally recovered. The woman looked happy as she washed the dishes and hummed a song to herself. No more need to provide guaranteed liquid breakfast, the young man noted happily. He decided to ask Naomi why she wanted to throw a party with him. The girl folded her hands as if in prayer and explained that she saw a whole world in him. I don't really understand. By the way, you have crumbs on your face, the hero remarked. Naomi replied that she didn't understand everything herself. Yukito was dissatisfied with this answer. This church minister was always leaving things unsaid, but the girl's words made him think. In the end, the guy decided it was a chance. Sooner or later, he'll get his hands on a dungeon that he won't be able to clear on his own. The hero remembered a piece of advice. Some dungeons shouldn't be explored without a team. A powerful magic amplifier was worth its weight in gold right now, so the young man decided to accept the church worker's offer. Takahashi held out his hand to the surprised girl. She didn't seem to expect the hero to agree so quickly. I accept your offer. I think it's worth a try, Yukito said. The girl's face lit up with happiness at his words. She smiled, held out both hands, and said, I need your help. Not much time had passed. The hallway was empty. The door swung open, and Takahashi stood in the doorway. Before setting off on an adventure with Naomi, I made some preparations. First of all, the hero bought a house for his family. Because he had become famous, the young man was concerned about the safety of his sister and mother. He had come under the scrutiny of many people. His enemies could harm his family. Naomi had left the church, and Yukito did not know where she was living now. The young man was concerned about the fate of this girl. Unpleasant thoughts often crossed the hero's mind. In case something happened to him, the young man thought about a safety net. He prepared all the documents to leave his earnings to his mother and sister as an inheritance. The young man never forgot about his girls and intended to take care of them even after his death if that should happen. I have to do this not for someone else, but for myself, to finally start the adventure, Yukito said to himself. Standing on the roof and enjoying the view, the hero suddenly heard, "Sorry for keeping you waiting." The young man's mother and sister were also nearby, and they were delighted to see Naomi. Takahashi smiled, happy to see his new partner. The two of them were excited and eager for the adventures that lay ahead. Their journey had begun. Even if I get a team, the situation around me won't change, Yukito thought. Naomi complained that it was very hot today. The hero replied that he hoped it would be cooler in Danji. Suddenly, the young man's attention was drawn to a billboard. It read, "The hero reached level 70 in record time." The guy understood that he was still very far from Uyama's achievements. No matter how hard he tried, the gap between their abilities was too great. Yukito thought about how the hero was able to develop much faster. But that doesn't bother me. In any case, I'll continue doing what I'm doing, the hero firmly decided. Lost in these thoughts, the hero didn't notice how they had reached the adventurer's office. In his past life, the young man had no hope, accustomed to a position in which he was weaker than others. Images from his miserable past flashed through his mind one after another. At that moment, Yukito was already standing in the place where the portal was about to activate. The hero smiled, eagerly awaiting new adventures and planning to enjoy every moment. The guy wanted to take advantage of every opportunity that came his way. Finding himself on a green lawn, Takahashi smiled at his old friends, while Naomi looked at them with apprehension. Among the lush grass, the friends saw white slimes. The churchwoman suggested that the hero put a buff on his speed. The young man refused this offer and asked to be allowed to fight them one-on-one. Naomi agreed, and in the next moment, 3 slimes attacked the hero. Luck has given me a significant advantage, the young man thought with a smile. Swinging his sword, he remembered that he had the power to destroy probabilities. With a single blow, he defeated the 3 slimes, and 3 rare artifacts appeared in his friend's arsenal. This also needs to be taken care of properly, thought the hero, looking at his sword. Suddenly, his companions heard a voice. "I see you're still at it as usual." "Oh, you're the one from the battle with the dishopper." Yukito recognized the stranger. The warrior smiled, behaving more friendly today than when they first met. "I'm still wearing the equipment you gave me," the stranger said gratefully. Naomi took her partner's action as a sacrifice, but the guy argued that it was only a momentary necessity. The young man asked the man how the cleanup was going. He replied, "Slowly, but actually I've retrained as a blacksmith." The man admitted that he had reached his limit as a fighter. Yukito replied, "I understand you. Being an adventurer isn't just about swinging your fists." The old acquaintance showed him on the map where his shop was located and invited him to come by if he needed anything repaired. Takahashi promised that he would definitely stop by after this trip. "I'll be waiting. Believe me, I'll give you the best service," the man promised with a smile. He considered the young man his savior and was very grateful to him for that. Yukito smiled at him as he left, genuinely happy about the encounter. If this has given someone a reason to start a new life, then I didn't open the retraining temple in vain, the hero thought with a sense of accomplishment. Now the path of the companions led them to the church, with all their adventures still ahead of them. In the presence of a nun, Naomi and Yukito stood in the center of the magical symbols depicted on the floor. The woman folded her hands on her chest and whispered a prayer. A few minutes later, the magic portal activated and the friends disappeared. The unknown did not frighten the two. They hurried toward adventure with smiles on their faces. Finding themselves on another floor, the partners opened the door and hurried outside. The landscape near the church on this floor was significantly different. Yukito immediately met a warrior. The young man apologized and asked how long they had been waiting. The 4 adventurers, including a girl, were happy to meet him. One of them replied that they had just arrived themselves. The hero bowed and said he hoped to learn a lot from them. "Hey, you who killed God's enemy, you don't have to bow to us," said one of the adventurers. Yukito modestly replied that he was just lucky. "I don't think such enemies can be defeated by luck alone," the knight objected. Takahashi was not yet used to such recognition and looked a little confused. After chatting a little more and discussing their plans, the whole company moved forward. The heroes' faces were stern and focused. The enemy was waiting ahead. It was a giant deadly scorpion, an incredibly strong and dangerous monster. Yukito loudly warned the others that this monster was poisonous. "Even if luck is a randomly received reward, only I decide how to use it," flashed through the hero's mind. One of the adventurers was the first to approach the scorpion. He was the first to receive a portion of luck. The second one was quick to follow and also received a boost from Takahashi. Takahashi himself did not lag behind the others. He rushed to help the adventurers. The hero hurried, drew his sword on the run, and gripped it more comfortably. Deftly pushing off the ground, Yukito was about to attack the monster from the air. At first glance, the scorpion's armor seemed very strong. It was unlikely that a sword could pierce it. But the guys worked lightning fast, attacking simultaneously, cutting off both claws and the monster's tail. The hero wanted to believe that everything he had received was his strength. A little later, his companions were recovering their strength by a lake, an oasis in the middle of the desert. Naomi took out her thermos and treated one of the adventurers to a healthy drink. You can't be a sociophobe all the time. It's time to actively communicate with others, not just your family, Yukito decided for himself. Immersed in conversation, the group did not immediately notice the danger that was rapidly approaching. It was a giant brown dragon that had decided to feast on human flesh. The hero and his girlfriend jumped to their feet, eager to defeat this evil creature. Naomi's magic staff appeared in her hands, its magical crystal instantly activating. Yukito soared into the air, feeling incredibly strong thanks to his girlfriend's magical support. One swing of his sharp sword and the dragon's head was cut in half. The creature died instantly, and the spectators were amazed at the abilities of their new comrade. Takahashi landed on the sand without a single scratch. Thanks to my luck, I will truly reach the top, the hero thought confidently.